Hello and welcome to the B&B show. My name is Brandon. This guy, let me get over here, right over here. That's going to be Brendan Seahawks, Brendan Nelson back in the house. And oh, lordy, do we got ourselves quite a few different little items to turn over here today as the free agency period has kicked off. Brendan's been basically running graveyard, night shifts, morning shifts. He's streaming 24/7 pretty much. So it's a wonder we've got him up and awake right now. How are you holding up, my guy?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. It's something that I've been doing for a few years in a row now, and I like doing it. So it's not always going to be easy. It's not always going to be convenient, but it's something that I like to do. And so far this year, I think it's worked pretty dang well.
Well, you always got, even if you don't have Hawk news, you always at least have league news and the considerations of what's going on with other teams within it, which does make it really fun to cover that type of stuff. And this is going to be one of those fun days, I think, for us, Brendan, that we get to cover because I think we get to look at some signings, we get to look at a trade, we get to look at what this means on the grand picture of things. This is a show, I think, that today covers a lot of different aspects of this team and about where they're going, not just the beginning of this free agent period. But I'd like to see with you off the rip, because I haven't had a chance to check with you. We're coming to this a little blind. Brendan, where are you as we are now? I know the official day was yesterday, but we're essentially 3-4 days into this here now. Where are you standing with the moves that have been made from that old big picture view of things?
I am pretty cool with most of it. I'm pretty happy with most of the decisions made so far. I think that this is an offseason where an approach like this is called for, maybe more than any offseason we've had in some time, other than maybe the one right after we traded Russell Wilson. I think that a slow approach makes sense. I think the approach we are taking lines up with the team that we have built. And I am pretty on board with the way they're conducting their business, keeping in mind there is a ton of time left between now and the start of the season, which I feel like the way some people are acting, it's as if we play our first game tomorrow. We play our first game next week.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important. People need to realize we are 6 months away from the start of the season, and everything that we're thinking about this team right now needs to be filtered through that lens.
Well, you've been doing this a couple of days to get a real pulse of the fan base and where they're at. So I guess this is going to be the next question I want to present to you, and a little bit in a long windup, which is, we talked just a tiny little bit before we went live about this, but to me, I do feel some of the frustration from some of the fan base and some of the overall moves that have been made. What's more the same, low end deals. This isn't going to significantly improve the team. And I hear where they're coming from on it, but I feel like at the kind of maybe the root on a lot of this anger and frustration, not anger, but just frustration, comes from, Brendan, maybe the fact that they want the team to be in a better position to compete for the 2024 season. And that these moves more signify you're going to have to maybe wait a year to get to that place. And that I understand naturally that can build some frustration there, but it doesn't in itself make the moves bad. It just things, I think that's where a lot of that frustration comes from. Is that fair? Or is maybe my outlook on this one where there's a deeper well of a reason there as to maybe why some of these folks out there have been so like, this is all you got?
I kind of understand it for some of the moves individually. I can understand people not liking. I can understand people taking certain things in isolation, but I do agree with you that it seems to be the overall strategy that people are not liking. And I do believe that it's a mistake to look at things through that lens. I do believe that if you take a step back and really consider things, you will find that in this league, in the NFL, the teams that spend big in free agency are the teams that don't win. They are the teams that actually do more losing. In fact, I saw a chart on X. You've probably seen this chart as well. It's been making the rounds lately. The correlation between dollars spent in free agency and winning over the last 12 years is almost exactly inverse. Like the team that has spent the most money in free agency by far over the last 12 years is the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have also lost more games than any other team over the last 12 years. I think second place is the New York Jets. And, the teams that are at the very bottom in free agency spending are teams like the Packers, who have consistently won games over the last 12 years. Teams like, I believe it is the Steelers are down there. They've been winning more than losing lately. The Patriots were right at the bottom until 2 years ago. And guess what started happening with the Patriots 2 years ago? They started losing.
Yeah. Belichick was trying to get covered up for the Tom Brady Super Bowl that went down. He's like, can I spend my way to a Super Bowl now that Tom just got one in Tampa Bay?
And the answer is no, you can't.
No, you cannot. That's right.
Yeah. So I think that you will find, if you look through history, for the most part, the teams that win and win at the highest level are the teams that apply a little bit of free agency spending power at strategic points rather than the teams that just start spraying the money around like crazy. And I know one thing that I've noticed from some of these people who are unhappy is they're labeling this a tank season, which I think is a big mistake to look at it that way. They're like, well, if we're not going to blow $1 billion on free agents, let's tank. And I think the answer is somewhere in the middle. And I'm finding these days people don't like the middle. People really don't like the middle. They either want to have Patrick Mahomes starting at quarterback, or they want to have Nathan Peterman starting at quarterback. There's no patience for anything in the middle, but sometimes you do have to walk before you run. The 2013 Seahawks do not happen without the 2012 Seahawks, which does not happen without the 2011 Seahawks, which doesn't happen without the 2010 Seahawks. And this is a season that might end up having more in common with the 2011 Seahawks than the 2013 Seahawks. And I don't really think there's anything wrong with that.
No, I don't either. I think those are all great points. And I think the place where you're at right now is a typical place that teams find themselves when turning it over in this way. And just because as well, Brendan, it's kind of like you're going to grandma's house and, she's got to move to a smaller place and you're starting to have to, get on into the basement, get on in all the crevices. The more time you've gone without change, the more extra kind of change that's going to need to kind of be brought in to make it happen. I was also posting the question to you. I posted, of course, to my chat a few times, being that, how many new coaches have walked into a destination the first time in the last 50 years of football and won a Super Bowl, much less even just get to a Super Bowl in the very first season of them walking in the door. It's a very rarity. Brendan had a good one. I think maybe Gary Kubiak there taking over for John Fox, but it's still something that you just so very rarely see. But to count on it and to sort of push your chips all into the middle of the table, trying to count on it would be very much kind of a fool's errand. You're going to end up being very disappointed on the outcome of that, even if you went strong and hard in that direction. It takes time, and the Seahawks seem to be taking the right type of time and approach on this to make this right. And to me, the silver lining on this, Brendan, is that 2025, I feel like we both need to be putting on sunglasses every time we talk about it, as far as the cap situation and proverbially all the things that they can do with not just the cap space, but also the flexibility of movement from the players that are actually making the money, where they're dead money to savings kind of runs.
Right. I think that the Jamal Adams decision was kind of a prelude to the way in which they were going to approach this offseason. But again, that doesn't mean you tank. I do think that by the time this is over, we will be near the salary cap ceiling. I do think that we will get up close to the cap when this is all over, because this is not a situation where you're trying to bottom out. Understand that, John Schneider has a potentially very limited amount of time to impress Jody Allen before he gets fired too. If she fired Pete Carroll, she can fire John Schneider too. I think that Mike McDonald wants to impress people in his first year. So understand that they're just not overextending themselves. That's what this offseason is about. They're not tanking. They're not trying to lose. They're just not overextending themselves. A tanking team would not have done many of the things that were done this offseason. So the answer is somewhere in the middle, where everybody hates to be, I guess.
Yeah. And I think you make a great point about the sort of, you're either with us or against us when it comes to any sort of given point, or, I run into that my same self, where you're trying to find a nuanced position and you sort of feel yourself being forced to be like, no, you're over here, or you're totally with us. And with this one, it is one where, no, I think they are, like you say, not necessarily tanking. There's a difference between we're not going all the way for it, and we are sort of just slowly getting this risen up in the right way while still strengthening things up in a way to where things could come together this year. And you never know with the NFL on given years how things can break down. So anything can happen. That's part of the beauty of the sport, in my opinion. For all the people that like to talk about things being scripted and all that, I think that truly anything can kind of happen year to year. And what you're just trying to do is stack up smart decisions, one upon each other. And they have definitely set that stage for 2025, which I just think is Magnificent, Brendan. Absolutely
Mhm.
magnificent. Well, let's start going through a little bit of this free agent timeline, Brendan, and break this down a little bit from start to beginning on how this stuff went down the pike on some of these free agents. Let's start off real quick though with acknowledging this monstrous
Oh, yes.
$50 donation. Got to do that, Mo Maggot Yalin. Thank you for the 50. I say $50 donation. That is very kind of you. He says Sam Howell, and that's with 2 exclamation points. I'm a Geno supporter, but this just opened up many possibilities. A king's bounty for a Geno trade, a possible opportunity to allow Howell to grow behind Geno, or a possible trade bargaining chip down the road when we want to draft our quarterback. And Mo Maggot, thank you for the $50 donation. We were going to go a little bit linear on this, but you dropped the $50 donation. So let's maybe cover a little bit of this right now, as we'll definitely be getting deeply into this subject, as along with many others here today, Brendan. No doubt about it. The Sam Howell one, another one where there's a little bit of frustration I'm hearing, and some people are loving it. It's one of those, again, you said, how'd you take it or leave it? You're with us against us, or the way you put it on it. Where there's, again, finding that kind of happy, I'm actually pretty good with it. I really do actually like this move, though. I'm thoroughly in the camp of, I don't really see the true bad cost here made. I don't think that you had to fill this position. I don't think there was as good a slot here in the draft, but give me some of your initial instincts on this Sam Howell situation.
Well, I'm a big fan of having a backup quarterback at a very cheap rate. Let me just lead off with that. Like, if you give me a choice between Sam Howell with 1 million and 1 million, or Drew Lock at 5 million, I think that's an easy choice.
Amen.
And Drew Lock probably is a little bit better than Sam Howell, but not by so much that I think spending 400% extra is justified.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
100% with you.
Yeah, so I like that. By the way, I know some people are going to talk about Justin Fields, but Justin Fields also is a pricey because he was a first-round pick. Sam Howell was a fifth-round pick. We're seeing all the washed-up veteran quarterbacks sign for significantly more than Sam Howell. Like Flacco got almost $9 million, which to me is bizarre and nonsensical. We saw guys like Sam Darnold got $10 million. Now I know they expect him to start, but for how long? He'll end up a backup one way or the other.
Yeah, I give him three games at most.
So who were some of the other like that level of backup? Like Jacoby Brissett, 8 million. Now he's good. He's clearly better than most backups, but he signs for 8 million. Give me Howell at 1 million and 1 million over the next 2 years. Let's start there.
Yeah, same. I mean, what did Minshew get too?
Minshew, he got 25.
There you go.
Yeah.
The backup cost ain't cheap. You want to run down that road. I'm with you on this, by the way, 100%, but keep going.
Now, Sam Howell, I remember we scouted him together last a couple years ago when he was in the draft, and that was a confusing evaluation. There was some stuff to like. There was also some stuff to really not like. He was like kind of doing the Tim Tebow thing where he ran for a ton of yards, but he was slow. Like he's Jordan Davis slow.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a miracle that he does what he does, but it's not something I expect to work great in the NFL. And yet it's actually kind of worked okay. I don't know what it is. I don't know how these people do it. It's like Mahomes does the same thing. He can't run fast at all, but when he needs those yards, he gets them. He's got kind of funky mechanics, but he does have an arm. He definitely has an arm. And overall, the evaluation is hit or miss. But at the end of the day, we were probably going to end up spending a day 3 pick on a flyer quarterback. So if you take a look at the picks we gave up and the picks we got back, because this was also a pick swap trade, it amounts to approximately an early 5th round pick, what we gave up to get him, which is maybe an area where we would have looked at a quarterback, and the quarterbacks we would have gotten in that range would have probably been Joe Milton, would have been, who's the Kentucky guy? Leary, maybe him, and Keaton Slovis. Maybe Plummer, yeah. Maybe the Kansas guy, Will Howard, would have been involved in there.
Jordan Travis is a possibility, but he might go into definitely the 4th or even maybe a 3rd with the way that
I have him as a 4th. I think he'll be a 4th. He was headed to the second round until he broke his leg.
I agree. Yeah.
Right. So when I look at it through that lens, I'm okay with it. I mean, Howell did start a full season last year, and there are problems with him. There are flaws with his game for sure. I think he got sacked like 5 times a game last year behind a decent offensive line in Washington. I do think that is a problem that he needs to work out. And there are problems with his decisions. He's really good at extending the play and then wishing he didn't extend the play because he ends up throwing an interception. You know, it's one of those things. But, you know, if he was a good quarterback, you wouldn't be able to acquire him, right? If he was actually like a good finished product, Washington would have won more games, so they don't have a top pick, so they can't get one of the best quarterbacks, and Washington would be more likely to be able to be wanting to just keep him. So I look at something like this and I go, you know, people in my chat were like picking him apart, like, oh, he throws too many interceptions, he takes too many sacks, and it's like, yeah, that's why you were able to trade for him. But there is an arm there, there is some mobility there, there is some stuff there that you like. So I'm pretty on board with it.
People seem to have a little bit more of an understanding or a belief system too that I'm reading sometimes from some of these critiques, Brendan, that a quarterback needs to come in as a finished product. I guess there's really no room for your development as a pro. What you walk in is what you are. What you are after a year or two, or just one season starting, is what you are, and that's the determination, and that's the final determination. Boy, I tend to find that as being quite unfair myself when looking at not just this particular quarterback, Brendan, but I've often talked about this with Geno and many other quarterbacks across the board, where you be careful to toss the young player down into the pit, the pit of trash, because after a year or two in a bad situation, he hasn't necessarily flourished. And that's, again, where I come with Howell, where you and I, neither of which have been over the board on this guy as a player, but his first year, his sophomore year, he was fantastic on the road to being a top 5 pick. Mm-hmm. He was playing in a spread system, which is a very important part of this process, because this is the first time he's going back to playing in a spread system now since he had his best success back in college in that sophomore season. Comes out as a junior year. He lost 4 skill position players to the draft. Not merely just losing them to going to the final year of college, but 4 guys drafted to the NFL that were his skill position players in that final sophomore year before he went to his junior season. So he has to kind of carry the team on his back, still throws for 3,000 yards. With the previous year, he threw for 3,600, runs for almost 1,000 yards, which was over the 200 that he ran for the previous year than that. And his stock drops in a way to me that was odd, where I didn't love his talent, but to get to the 5th round, I thought it was a little bit silly. He sits the full first year in Washington, and then he gets 1 year of starting. He throws 21 interceptions in his first year of starting at 23 years old, and we know he now sucks. Again, people have way more ability of understanding this than I do on it, because I'll make the evaluations on guys, but to get to a place of determining, no, that guy just absolutely sucks, when I go, wow, first year, he threw for 21 touchdowns and 4,000 yards. On a Washington team that's not good, with a defensive-minded head coach, for a team that sold at the trade deadline. Trade deadline, they were like, who wants Montez Sweat? Who wants Chase Young? How can we offload these guys? And the other part they don't kind of think about this with the interception part is he was kind of like having a lot of times score a lot of points because that defense was kind of not holding up over the course of the year, which does kind of start to affect the quarterback play. We've seen that at times, here where that QB every time has got to go up there and score. It's hard to play the position super efficiently and super safe when you're asked to have that kind of, requirement.
Yeah, he had to throw the ball over 600 times last year. I think that, if you asked Drew Lock to throw the ball 611 times in one season, would he throw 30 interceptions?
Oh, he would easily be above the 21 mark. I guarantee you on it.
Yeah, exactly.
I guarantee you. Yes. It's a great point. So I love this deal too. I just don't, you mentioned the price. That's a huge part of this. 1/5 the cost of what you would have had to do to go get a veteran on the market. The guy John's anticipating, I think, a little bit in this draft. And we're going to have to talk about the fact, Brendan, this also does mean probably not a quarterback at the top. I mean, this does more than anything start to remove that as a possibility here.
I agree.
But John's seeing the run on the QBs here. He sees that you're going to get a bunch taken off the top. That's going to remove those middle ground guys. Then you're left with the guys Brendan talked about in the 5th round. And he's going, okay, we need a backup. I don't want to spend $5 million for a mid. I don't want to put a 5th round, 4th round pick on a guy that's not good enough. but here's this guy I can get where I don't even lose the number of draft picks. I move back a couple of picks collectively in a couple of rounds, and I get a guy that I got on cheap club control deal, who, by the way, then next year, I mean, as Mo Mag is talking about here, Brendan, opens up the door for what you could do with Geno. If he has a great season here in the first year, and you can now go, okay, well, we want to go draft our quarterback of the future or ride with Geno or do whatever. But if Sam goes out there and plays well, and the potential of what you can do with him on that now, I think this just opens the door to so many possibilities.
Yeah. And in a way, we did just draft a quarterback just now. We spent the equivalent of a 5th round pick on a quarterback that Schneider claims to have really liked a couple years ago. I don't know how much I believe him, but I believe him to a certain extent. And he's younger than some of these quarterbacks in the draft. He's younger than Bo Nix. I think he's younger than Penix. He's younger than a couple other of the guys near the top as well. Like, I think Spencer Rattler might be 38 at this point, so he's definitely younger than him. But in some ways, you could just look at it like we did just draft a quarterback. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I would love to get the uber talented guy, but you got to just get what's available to you, right, Brendan? That's the bottom line. You can dream of the big and the spectacular, but what's really truly available that we have to pick from? And I think of all the options they took here, they took a very smart road and approach. And people might be just surprised about how potentially this kid's got still a little bit of upside, still got something to his game. I'm not saying that he's our QB1 of the future, but I am saying that there's a chance that this kid's got, for the story being told about him at 23 years old. You said there's multiple quarterbacks in this draft older than him who were playing college last year while he was in the pros. That I think that there's still a possibility of some growth here for him to be able to do some things. And he's a fun player to watch, man. In that game last year against us, he's a gamer. He'll play fearlessly. Yeah, the interceptions are a problem. Yeah, the sacks are a problem, but he's going to let it rip. He's got a good arm to him as well on top of it, Brendan. And back to the spread system, man. Maybe that'll be back in the hand and glove. He had threw for 10,000 yards in college, 3 seasons, 92 touchdowns. So the man can sling it.
Right.
Thank you, though, Mo Maggot. Appreciate you for that. Let's go ahead and start off here. I know we did a little bit of a jump on that, but wanted to get to Mo's big fat donation. Very kind of you for that.
Yeah.
So what do we got as far as our first order of business on that first day? It was a long first day. Boy, for you, very long, I'm sure. You got up at, we were 8 a.m, starting up over there. Going live, waiting, Brendan. Chad getting apoplectic. And we finally get to the end of the day. Hawks pulled a little bit of news right at the end of that day one, didn't they?
Yes, they did. Early on, it was just kind of slowly bleeding away. Colby Parkinson goes to the Rams, and I didn't think anybody was going to be upset about losing Colby Parkinson when they saw the contract he got, but I was wrong, man. I was wrong.
Yeah. I didn't realize. I was like, no big loss. Okay, no, maybe it was a big loss.
Yeah, and then we had the Will Dissly signing away, which that one I could have been a little more amenable to, like 3 years, $14 million. That would have been okay to bring him back for. If we had done that, I would have been like, okay, we saved a bunch of money and got a player who I still think is fairly good. But I wasn't sad about it either. And then you had the Jordan Brooks thing. That was like in the afternoon. That was the interesting one because the perception of Jordan Brooks is all over the place. Like, I've never seen a player more all over the place than the perception of Jordan Brooks. Some people think he's a top 3 linebacker and worth $20 million a year. Some people don't think he belongs in the league. Some people, find themselves in various stages of the middle. And it feels like all of them can actually like coherently argue their points. I don't get the sense that any of them are just completely brain dead. I think that there is like some arguments that you can make in all these different directions. So he signs with Miami, which a lot less than I thought he was going to get. It's like 3 years, $26 million or something.
That's right.
Which I'm not upset about losing him because I'm not a big Jordan Brooks fan. That price I would have been okay with. I'll say that much. But again, I'm not really a Jordan Brooks fan. So to me, it's like, let's try to do better. Let's try to do cheaper. One of the two. Yeah.
I mean, and me on what camp I'm pretty firmly on here with Jordan, as I've been pretty vocal about this for a while. Modern era and on defenses are pass happy affairs, and you need to be able to cover in the modern era. You can't just be a complete liability on that aspect and what you bring. There's some potential with Jordan with maybe being in man coverage where he's got some upside to him on that. And to where if you got him into a system where he did more of that, maybe he would be able to handle those duties a little bit better than the zone stuff where he has to sort of think and read and react in space and sort of do two things at once, follow the quarterback's eyes, feel the guy coming into my coverage zone. But it does seem like, especially for the guy we'll talk about here about who they signed today, that there was definitely a plan involved in this where they thought we can get what he's doing right now in a cheaper form and not have to spend that kind of money and not have to put that kind of extra years of financial commitment to it to get that, kind of equivalent level of play. And
yeah. And by the way, I know that Schneider today said that they lost Brooks because they were busy talking to Williams. But I don't believe him. I don't believe that at all. That doesn't make any sense. If that's true, that's really, really stupid.
I was on the line with Leonard Williams and we were having a real heart to heart. I was just like, I've got to sell you on this now. And, I just couldn't get over to Jordan. He was online too, and he was with the Dolphins in that moment in their room. And I was like, I want to get to you, Jordan. I want to get to you, man. But me and the big cat are having a talk right now. We're having a bro talk.
Yeah. So I think we just didn't want him. And I find that to be fascinating because you've got this linebacker guy coming in and Mike McDonald. And he's like, no, $9 million for Jordan Brooks. No, I don't want to do that. Apparently, I would assume, I don't think any tables were pounded to keep Jordan Brooks, because if there was a table pounded, we probably would have beat that offer.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. And I think that's probably the same thing you take away with Queen and not going a couple million more for him, despite a guy that also looked like he had a bit of a more depressed market than people were anticipating. And McDonald had the familiarity with him. But I think Mike understands what he's looking for in the linebacker position. Maybe understands he can get that level of production without having to pay that big financial cost.
Right. So after that, people were just starving for something. We waited all day. We finally got something, and it was not what I expected, but given what had happened earlier that day, maybe it makes sense. The Seahawks brought back Noah Fant, the tight end. We don't know the exact contract details yet, which is unacceptable. Beat writers, do your job, please. I need those contract details. I'm hungry.
We're trying to figure out the freaking cap space. Throw us a bone here.
Yeah, I know. But 2 years, $21 million, which is a little less than I was thinking he was going to get. I projected like $13 million a year. Spotrac right at the end threw up a projection for him of $6 million a year, which was like, I didn't believe that. But he kind of ended up landing in the middle. 2 years, $21 million. That's $10.5 million a year. Would not surprise me if it's structured in such a way where the first year cap hit is like $6 million. And then if he's released next offseason, the debt is going to be like $3 million, which turns it into basically a 1 year, $9 million deal with a void year to spread out the cap hit. So I imagine that's kind of what we're looking at there. Kind of like with Jaron Reed last year. We gave him a 2 year deal with an easy out. I think Fant's probably got something similar, but we decided to keep our tight end here. And I found this really interesting because, thinking about the Seahawks next year, they're probably going to do a lot of 11 personnel, right? Because their receivers are the strength of their team. And we know they're bringing back Lockett now, so that's not going to change. So you're going to see a lot of 11 personnel. So that's one tight end on the field. And I think what happened is that Ryan Grubb, since he's only going to have one tight end on the field, even though he has great receivers, wants that tight end to be a playmaker, somebody who can get down the field, somebody who can make big catches, someone who's actually like a move tight end with a lot of talent, with a lot of speed, like he had with Culp. And I know Culp wasn't used that much, but what we've learned, especially from that combine, is that Devin Culp can move. He is one of the fastest tight ends in NFL combine history, actually. He can fly. So I think he's like, okay, if I don't bring back Noah Fant, I'm looking around the tight end market. There's nothing, right? Like it's a bunch of old guys who can't really move that well anymore. They're like 4'7", 4'8" guys now.
Wheelchair boys. Yeah.
And in the draft, I mean, there are some good options, but the only one that can give me a good year one option might be Bowers. And it's a pipe dream for him to fall to 16. That's just not realistic. That's not happening. And if it's not him, then I need to, wish upon a lucky star with a guy like Ben Sinote, who I like, but will he be ready year one? I don't know. There are going to be guys like Theo Johnson. Is he going to be? He might never be ready. He might not be ready in 20 years. He's a complete project. So he goes, I need Noah Fant back because I may not use tight ends a ton in this offense, but I need the tight end we have to be able to do these things. So I know that, I had people in my chat going, oh, he didn't catch any touchdowns last year. Why did we sign this guy back? And I think it's important to understand that Grubb is probably viewing him very differently than Waldron did.
Yeah, I think some salient points put it down there, Brendan, and maybe I can just add a couple on top. First off, the Huskies did run a lot of 12 personnel last year, and they had Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan, and Romo Odunzie. I'm just not going to try to pronounce his name because I think I butchered every time. But he had a situation like our situation here with 3 wide receivers where he could have just buried it in on them and never utilized his tight ends and just been like, I'm just going to lean on these guys wholesale. And he didn't do it. So he wants to run power. It's hard to run power-based concepts out of 11 personnel because you end up with 3 wide receivers and they're going to have to get down there blocking the guys, and they don't tend to block all that well across the board, and that's so getting to the 12 personnel is important, I think, from that standpoint. This is also, of course, in tandem with the Pharaoh Brown signing a little bit. But your points are right. He's a move tight end. He gets open in space. When he came here, Brendan, it stood out. I think he was at the prior year coming here from Denver. I haven't checked of where he's at currently with the next generation stats on this, but he was at 2.5 yards of separation per route coming out of Denver at the tight end position, which was the best in the NFL. And I'd reckon to guess that he has still remained in one of those places in his ability. And it's very hard for tight ends to generate separation because they run such short routes and there's so little time for them to get that kind of separation. 2 big things that I think are going to really help his upside, and I think are the main reasons why you saw, Brendan, all 3 of the Seattle Seahawks tight ends taken on the very first day of free agency. Number 1, what was the Seahawks offense? 9th most efficient in all of football last year? Something like that?
Seahawks offense, I think it was 10th in EPA per play.
10th in EPA per play. Their defense basically led the league in defensive plays on the football fields. Your offense was very little on the field in the first place. Then you've got that other stat, the fact that they didn't target the middle of the field, which is the main place that you would look to utilize a tight end would be the middle of the field. And you start to go, okay, if I'm looking at any of these Seahawks tight ends, not just Noah Fant, but Disley or Parkinson too, and I go, well, those guys did what they did on the back of those 2 big stats to me. Team wasn't on the field, highly efficient when it was, and they don't throw to the middle of the field. I think you stack that together on looking at a proverbial tight end going, well, where's this guy going to be if he goes here? You go, oh, well, maybe there is something here a little bit more with this guy and what he can bring to the table. I do think that is the case with Noah. And you can't forget he had a young Drew Lock through the first couple of years, not necessarily featured in this offense in the best of ways to utilize his abilities. And maybe there is definitely still, again, a little bit upside here. So I like the deal. I was okay with it. Like you said, I think the first year is brought down.
Yeah, I heavily suspect that I heavily suspect that Noah Fant. I think what they're trying to do here is kind of do quality over quantity, because under Waldron we did a lot of 3 tight end sets, and with the 3 tight end sets you want 3 guys who are pretty good, and now I think that's going to be reduced heavily. I think that our 3rd tight end this year may end up being somebody who almost never plays or only.
It's going to be Fant.
Well,
George.
Oh, George. Yeah. Somebody who catches maybe 2 passes all season. Like Brady Russell got tendered, by the way. It might be him. And kind of, you think that'll get rescinded?
No, he'll be a practice squad guy.
Oh,
George Fant will be your 6th tight end, because that's I believe what they've done here, Brendan, is they've comboed the 2 roster spots. I could be wrong, but I think they're comboing the 2 roster spots for 1. So instead of having to now keep a spot open on your roster for the 3rd tight end, you bury that now to another position of you want to keep a guy on the roster with, and George just comes out there if ever you go to your 3 tight end sets. So whenever you go heavy, whenever you go goal line, to your point on your original point with this, you're going to those less now. You're not going to be in the 3 tight end sets like you once were before at as high a level, as a high number of plays.
Right. Yeah. So I think that they just needed somebody who can do the things that Fant does. And I understand that, some people are hung up on his production over the last couple of years. I think context matters here. I think I don't think you're going to see as much 12 personnel as you did last year in Washington. I think that you're going to see mostly 11 personnel. I'm sure there's going to be some 12. I'm not doubting that at all. But I do think you're going to see, because our receivers are such a strength of the team. Remember, last year, the Huskies lost Jalen McMillan for most of the season.
Good point.
So we kind of had to go 2 tight end more because our receivers were hurt. But if we have Metcalf, Lockett, and JSN for a bunch of for most of the season, most of the games, I think we are going to live in that package by and large. So I look at that and I go, they want the one tight end they have on the field to be really good and somebody who can run all the routes, somebody who can, actually beat a guy down the field with his speed, with his agility, because I think he had, like, his testing scores were some of the best we've seen from any non-Kyle Pitts tight end in the last 6 or 7 years, I think.
He'd have pretty much, absent that one Colts score on the 40, I think, Brendan, he'd have basically everybody whooped in this last combine across the board on the rest of the 20 shuttles and some of the explosive testing scores.
Right. So I'm good with it, but we need to see what Grubb ends up doing, because there were some promises made with Fant under Waldron that I don't think got totally fulfilled. So you never know how it's going to go, but I see where it's going.
Well, to your promises unfulfilled, the Washington Huskies weren't necessarily highly affluent with attacking the middle of the field last year. So that maybe is something that has a little bit of carryover still coming into play.
I think there was a lot more of that in Fresno State. And I think Penix was kind of the guy who wanted to just push the ball deep a lot because that was his strength as a player.
Let the big dog hunt, man.
Yeah. And he's completely justified to do that. But also I look at it like, I also kind of look at it in the sense of, the deep ball is starting to fade away in the NFL, where we're not seeing the cover 2 shell has just killed these deep ball offenses, which is a big reason why Russell Wilson's career has gone the way that it has.
I agree.
They just kind of take it away from him. And that's why Patrick Mahomes plays a lot of his games now like he's, Chad Pennington.
It is, and he had to go through that transitionary state, right, Brendan, where he was doing the sort of same stuff Russell Wilson was when he had Tyreek Hill there, especially with the, F it, I'll throw down the field, Tyreek's down there somewhere. But he got dealt with that same cover 2 shell stuff. Fangio gave him it fits at times in trying to play it, and it forced Mahomes to have to expand his game into being more of the check down merchant type to get things done, and he embraced that. But that's what it's basically forced you to do as a quarterback, is you just got to play it very patiently.
Right. So, but yeah, Noah Fant on board with it, but we'll see what happens when the season starts.
Yeah. It's fair signing. It was good for me too. I mean, I would have been okay if they moved on, but I get the fact that you look on the market, like you said in your point too, really lean open market, tight end class. We're getting another one that's last year was pretty good. People kind of oversell it, Brendan, because of the Laporta factor,
right?
But every year we're doing this, you and I are looking at this and we're like, there's like 4 guys, there's like 5, maybe 5. If you just have this guy do this thing, he'll be okay. And the other guys can kind of do the rest of the stuff. So it's always a lean group. You don't want to be stuck coming into the draft having to pick at a lean position.
Right, exactly. And I don't think tight end's that lean, but it's really bottom heavy. It's like there are a lot of guys I like in day 3, but I still don't feel amazing about any of them, right?
Yeah. Well, you're right. There's upside to them, but there's also that likely going to be at the low floor part that you see on the tape at times with like a Brevin Span Ford. It's like physically looks the part, but when you actually turn the tape, it's like, especially this last year, just it really isn't kind of quite there.
Can I break a little bit of NFL news? Just
let's go.
Break here?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay, Keenan Allen to the Bears, 4th round pick.
Oh, Bears making some moves. Okay.
They're building an offense around whoever their quarterback is going to be.
Yeah. So you got Moore and Keenan Allen as your 1 and your 2 out there. Okay. That's kind of interesting. I mean, he's getting up there in age, but he's been productive for a long period of time.
Yeah. Cole Kmet, tight end. He's good.
Cole's a pretty solid tight end for them. I would be just trying to, if I was Chicago, to me though, I'd send a 9. I guess they're going to probably just get the lineman. They'll go Caleb. They'll get another lineman. They got Darnell Wright last year as that right tackle guy set, right? So they're starting to they're doing the right thing, which is get the line set up for Caleb at the forefront, maybe then go get him the skill position players. Especially because they buried a 2nd rounder for Chase. I mean, they got kind of spanked on the bottom on that one, man.
Awful. And here's kind of the juicier one.
Ooh.
Marquise Hollywood Brown, 1-year deal with the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh, okay.
All right.
He's okay. Speedster. I mean, they get a speedster back in the house legitimately for him. They haven't had that there for a while, unless you want to count Marcus Valdez-Scantling as that guy.
Right.
So
yeah, just wanted to pass those along real quick because it's non-trivial, significant.
no, it's a big move. It'll certainly affect the upcoming draft. I mean, do the Chiefs probably still I think double down because they probably get rid of Kadarius Toney and not move off this guy more experienced, but just don't count on him. So they're still very likely, I think, attack in the first round at the end of the first round and get him another wide receiver out there.
Probably.
A couple donos here, Brendan. Let me get these as I don't want to get too far behind on these. Thank you for Samuel Carlson for the $2 donation. He says, I can sleep well knowing we won't get JJ McCarthy now. I'm going to join you in that fine, fitful rest, Samuel. How about you, Brendan?
Yeah, I think it's becoming very clear he was never going to be there for us anyway. So I was never really worried about it. Like they're saying now he's going to go top 5. Like somebody's going to trade up to 5.
I'm going to laugh so hard. I'm going to laugh so hard when it goes down. I don't care. I'll be in this trench take, Brendan. I'm going to be in this trench on this take. I will go down on this hill. I'm going to laugh and be like, they're going to regret that one. Giants at 7, they'll regret, or 8, whatever they're at, though. They're not going to like that one. But I just say, thank God we didn't take them. I don't think we're in a position to take a quarterback, certainly not the ones that would be available to us where we took them, nor to move up in the draft. So this just sets the stage for us to have that much more of a high probability for a successful draft with this move with Howell today. And that's just one of the many reasons there, Brendan, that it makes me very, very happy.
Right.
Thank you, Samuel. Appreciate you for that donation. Kirk Stemmer, thank you for the $10 donation. He says the Sam Howell trade is a waste of draft capital if he isn't viewed as more than a backup. Last year, Seattle traded back from 83 to 108 and got a third in return. Drafting a rookie would make more sense. What do you think about that one, Brendan?
I think that there's a few different angles here that things need to be looked at through here. Like the trade being a waste of draft capital. Again, in approximate value, we gave up an early to middle 5th round pick, which if we had signed a prolific backup quarterback, we would have been losing in next year's draft, right? Because of the compensatory game. So you have to understand that even if you sign a quarterback that you don't trade for, you're still going to lose a pick probably in that range. Like if we had signed somebody like Ryan Tannehill, that probably counts against us in the compensatory game. So we're still losing the pick. We're just doing it 1 year later in that case. And then it also has to be factored in the fact of how cheap he is. $1 million this year, $1 million next year. So $2 million over 2 years. Whereas most of these backup quarterbacks that are considered to be, the friskier backup quarterbacks, I guess would be the phrase, they're going for 5, 6, 7, 8 times that. So you do trade a little bit of capital so you can have the luxury of a backup that is that cheap. You're also getting a backup who can at least somewhat play in the NFL because he's done it. We've seen it. He had a year with plenty of problems, but also some good things in Washington. If you spend that same 5th round pick on a legitimate rookie, he might be as lost as Paxton Lynch was. He might be as lost as Johnny Manziel was and not give you even that security of a backup. So I think that when you filter everything through the proper lens, you'll see that even if he is just a backup quarterback who is ultra cheap, then he's still worth it. You need a backup quarterback.
You do. I think every one of Brendan's points on this, Kirk, are pretty much along the line of where I would be with this as well. And I think that it's with what you gave up in the quantitative value, because you're not giving up any pick here. You're moving back. There's no actual cumulative pick that's been lost at any point in this process. It's a matter of you moving back the spaces. But to say that we should just draft the quarterback is also the one other aspect I just want to add on top of Brendan's thoughts on this is that who was the quarterback you were going to get? Joe Milton is older than Sam Howell.
Yeah.
That's the guy you're drafting with that pick that you keep or in that spot that you stay with. That's the guy that you are likely to get. And I know some like Jordan Travis, but I do feel like because of the run of quarterbacks at the top of this draft, the two guys that are going to be beneficiaries of that in the second, the third, and maybe into the fourth round with that are going to be JJ Rattler or Spencer Rattler and Jordan Travis. Those two guys will come up probably because of the dire scarcity that exists behind them as far as the talent level goes. But unfortunately, I would love to have seen this draft us, Brendan, to have 15, 20 guys from the fourth round onward to the seventh round where you're like, hey, this guy's kind of a small school guy's got this. Hey, this guy's got a little bit of that there, and he's coming from big school, but he's underwhelmed, but he's still got some talent to him. It's just unfortunately not really the case. Versus Howell, who, like I said, with his college career and the productivity that he had coming out, with his skill set being that he's got the big arm, he's got the ability to move, he's shown you that he can start capably in this league, and you're getting in that the cheap cost that Brendan said. To me, it's just there's so much there that hard for me to shake a stick at on that. I don't think that there's a big, large cost or price that's being paid here. It's a very, very minimal, low cost, I would even offer.
Right. And if you work under the impression that the pick swaps are roughly equivalent to a fifth rounder. And by the way, I saw a lot of people sell this as, oh, we just traded a third round pick for Sam Howell. I saw that take on X a lot today, and I find it to be incredibly disingenuous.
Yeah, that's not right. That's not correct.
Right. But I think that when you look at it like that, yeah, he's worth it if he's just a backup because he's a backup with experience, right? That's kind of the selling point of a guy like Drew Lock, right? We should give $5 million to Drew Lock because he has NFL experience. Well, now we're spending $1 million on a guy who has slightly less experience, and his experience has been bumpy. So is Drew Lock.
Who had the better year, Brendan? Drew Lock started what, 2 years? Who he had two extra. Drew Lock actually got two swings at the hammer on this one. Howell's only gotten the one. Who would you say had the better years from those three prospective years? The two that Locke essentially got to start and the one that Howell got to start?
I think there's a pretty good equivalency there, honestly. I think that Howell probably had a little more to work with because he had a couple of nice receivers. I like McLaurin a lot. He had the Logan Thomas tight end, I think. I like him. But it's very equivalent, isn't it? Like Locke had a lot of the same issues. Locke had a bad organization at that point in time. The Broncos, there's been all that stuff said about how Vic Fangio didn't like Locke and set him up to fail. I think that Sam Howell to some regard was set up to fail as well. I think they were just throwing him out there to the organization's literally getting handed over the course of that season. Basically, it's like they're bringing a new owner. It's a lame duck coach. Everybody knows he's a lame duck. So I think there's a lot in common between those two guys if you were to compare their full seasons. But, I will say this, admittedly, I do think that Locke got benched by the end of his season as a starter. Did Howell ever get benched as bad as he was at times?
No, I believe he played out through the whole course of the season.
Right. So yeah, I don't agree that the fifth round pick is not worth a cheap backup quarterback that still gives you some veteran experience.
I do agree with you, and I thank you, Kirk, for the $10 donation. I do think to even give you maybe a little bit more silver lining beyond what Brendan just said. Last thing on this, just that I think there is a little bit of upside here in this kid still. He's not a 28-year-old guy who's been in this league 5 years, had 3 different chances. He had that one chance last year. He's still tremendously young. He was not just a 1-year wonder in college. He had 3 great years of production in college. So I think that there still is some hope here that you may be getting a little bit more here. There's some more meat left on this particular bone, and we'll see if he's got that. But I do like the move. Thank you though, Kirk. I appreciate you for that. Save the Geese. Thank you for the $2 donation. He says, remember, Brett Favre and Steve Young were both traded for. Indeed.
I mean, stranger things happened. It would certainly be a strange thing that happened if Sam Howell turns into Brett Favre or Steve Young. But stranger things have happened for sure.
In Young's case, he was a more highly touted prospect coming out than a Sam Howell. But I will say this, Sam Howell's year starting versus Young starting, I believe, for the Buccaneers. Again, though, bad organizations at a bad time. The Buccaneers were a joke at that time. And so any quarterback going there was going to fail. But nonetheless, I would say that you no doubt could look at Howell and say he was much more successful than Young in his first start with the Bucs. And in Favre's case, I believe he was a little bit too busy with the drinky poo with the Atlanta Falcons to even get on the field, much less I think Glanville just didn't like the kid. But certainly there's more track record here is my point on Howell and what he's brought. But yeah, this has been a pathway in the NFL that's happened a couple times. We're driving for guys, getting for guys. And Washington's in a situation where they're not moving Howell, I think, to just because from the perspective of he sucks. I think they're moving him because it's just clearing the deck all the way through. They want to get a veteran in there for the young quarterback. They usually, if you're going to get the Caleb Williams, you don't want to stack the Caleb Williams with another young quarterback who's learning at the same time. You want the mentor Marcus Mariota type that's there right now for whatever he brings. To be able to guide the kid on some of these things.
Right.
Thank you, though, Geese. Well said on your part. Love those examples. Joey Berardi says, with a $2 donation, thank you, Joey. Jake Kerhand is to the Chicago Bears on a contract. So how about Jake finding a landing spot? Brendan helps out the compensatory situation. Does it not? Did we non-tender him? So it's considered the equivalent of the release on that one, or is this a?
We would get a compensatory pick if he gets paid enough, which I seriously doubt.
Probably not.
Yes, like we didn't even get a compensatory pick for DJ Dallas, I don't think, and what he got has to be more than what Kerhan got.
Yeah, I would estimate as well. We don't get anything for DJ. I guess that makes sense.
We do if he meets his incentives enough to boost his salary up to above $3 million, I think. But okay. I feel like that's somewhat unlikely. Well, who starts at running back for Arizona this year? It's still Connor, right?
Connor. They got a couple. Remember, they got the Demarcardi. Right. Remember the whatever his name was? He had the Italian-ish name.
Yeah.
I forget.
Yeah, you could see a situation where he gets hurt and DJ Dallas actually puts up some numbers and that boosts his salary to the point where you could get one, but I wouldn't bet on it.
Yeah, well, and certainly James has got a lot of games he's played in this league, so we'll see where he's at from a health standpoint moving forward. He had some injuries this past year, but still was really good back when he was on the football field. But Joey, understandable that they were going to let Jake Rand go to Chicago at this point. He's not a real mobile offensive lineman. You went out in free agency and grabbed another guy that we're going to be talking about here shortly as his replacement that you believe is better, and I believe is better as well, not to mention a guy that can play both tackle positions coming up here. So understandable they let this one slide, but hopefully still yet, Brendan, they can play that compensatory game to some way here.
Yeah, I think that's a big priority this offseason, honestly, when you look at the way they're doing things.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Thank you, though, Joey, for that donation. Sayang Adobo. Thank you. Have become a member of the channel. I don't know if that's for yours or mine on this.
I think it's me.
That's you. So there we go. Thank you, Cy Yang, for jumping aboard Seahawks, Brendan Nelson. And folks, do me a favor. Please do hit the like button on this video if you could for me too today, please. And subbed up on both channels if you're not. I'd really appreciate it.
Broke 17,000 today.
Let's go, Brendan. Let's go. Out of way. Doing work before we even get to the draft.
That's right.
That work. Randall McDaniel in the house. How you doing, Randall? Thank you for the $5 donation. Randy liked Sam coming out. To me, he's very similar to Bo Nix, but can push it a bit more. Never understood why he slipped to round 5. Well, thank you. Appreciate it, Randall, on the donation.
Yeah, if Bo Nix runs the 40 time that I'm afraid he will, then yeah, there will be a lot of in common with him and Sam Howell, actually, because I suspect Bo Nix is going to really disappoint with that 40. It's going to be like 4.8 or 4.9. I got a bad feeling.
I kind of is a big harbinger on where he goes, right? Because if he goes out and runs a 4.5, he stays into probably the top 15 area. And if he goes out and runs like a 4.8, like you're saying, he probably then legitimately dips into the second round, doesn't he?
I think so.
So you talk about one particular testing metric because he didn't do anything at the combine on that stuff, holding so much weight over a particular prospect. I think he's that guy because he needs his legs, man, for what he does in the pocket and the way he processes in the pocket, or at least what he showed on tape. You want to make sure you can lean back on his legs if he is a little bit of a kind of, what would you call a quarterback that's a little stifled in the progression read system of things. Latency issues, you want to call it that?
An RG3, I don't know.
Yeah, something along those lines. But I didn't either. I think I understood why both me and Brendan saw Malik Willis, and we were both raising our crucifixes to him like a vampire as we approached the draft. And we liked Ritter, but a little bit later, did not like Baby Hands Pickett. Nobody wanted Baby Hands Pickett, not me nor Brendan, not any Seahawks fan. And that did lead you to a place where you went, okay, Ritter and Howell were the kind of the interesting ones. I think Howell was the one that I didn't quite understand going to the 5th round, though, like you did, Randall. A guy with his skill set who does what he does to drop where he dropped was kind of, to me, definitely a strange one, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of happened all over that draft. I remember there was buzz that Malik Willis was going to go number 2 overall, and then he barely went in the top 100. Like, QB stuff was weird, that one. I thought that Ritter was going to go earlier than he did too, honestly. I thought Ritter was going to go a little bit higher. So it was just one of those things where things kind of kept getting away. But at no point during that draft did I really feel like I wanted to use one of those picks on one of the quarterbacks. Even though I would have been okay with it at a certain point.
Yeah. No, I was with you. Well, and I remember we were going with it too on through the draft, and you were having some really good players available to you going through those picks in those spots where you're going, man, I just want to stay on these. I don't want to go. I know we need QB, but I like this. I like that. I like this. So it's just like the draw just wasn't there to do it at the timing wasn't right, and timing's right now. And I'm glad to take the flyer on him at this point at that cheap cost without having to give up much to get him. To me, Randall, it's like, that's an easy peasy move for John Schneider to make. And I like the Bo Nix comp in a lot of regards on this. I think that it's probably a pretty fair one. And he certainly did a lot more pushing the ball down the field, a lot more processing on the football field, because the Chan-Gailey spread concept that Sam Howell was coming from within that sophomore year was one that was very reliant upon the quarterback using his noggin and having to actually do some processing post-snap as to where he was going with the ball. And a lot of processing to, bing, 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 get to the 9 route. And boy, Howell's got just a cacophony of 9 route throws on his UNC tape. It's a fun watch. You want a fun highlight watch? Go check out the Sam Howell UNC highlights, because especially that sophomore year, Brendan, he's just dropping dimes from the heavens left and right.
Yeah. Takes him a couple minutes to load up the gun, though.
There's a loading mechanism. Yes, there is a little bit of you can hear it grind, and then you see the gears turning on the side of him, interlaced like a watch. But he gets it out eventually, man, with a little bit of oomph. But thank you, Randall. I'm 100% with you on this one. Randall with another $5 donation as well. Says Brown, Jenkins, and Sam are either equal to or better than Disley, Diggs, Locke. Believe the 3 will be about what Diggs' salary would be, if not less. So Rayshawn Jenkins and Brown and Sam. He's shorthanding it. Was there?
Well, that would be the Brown is Pharaoh Brown, right?
Right.
The Brown is Pharaoh Brown, and the Sam is hold on one second here. I have the list of stuff here. It's not George, it's not Rayshawn. It is Sam Howell, I guess.
Oh, Howell. There we go. Yes. Okay. Yeah, I'm with your analogy on that for sure. I think that the Hawks and a lot of what they did with the safety position, to your point, Randall, and the linebacker position, which we'll be talking about tonight, was that they found guys that they thought, I think, were at this level here, but we paid this much lesser of a price for that particular player. You're not just paying these upper prices because a guy's been in-house in your organization, whatever. You pay what really you can find on the market in equivalency. And I would agree with you on that. I think that that's a pretty fair outlook on the situation.
Right. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Randall. Well said, though, man, on that. Nolan, thank you for the $5 donation. He says, I don't see any of the rookie quarterbacks being much better than Howell, if at all. John Schneider said that there was some other teams in the mix, thus the extra compensation.
I heard a rumor that Sean Payton was kind of in on Howell, but he lost a 3rd rounder in the trade with Seattle last year to get Riley Moss, so he couldn't quite get up there. But if Sean Payton likes him, then that's kind of a vote of confidence, right? He seems to know quarterbacks.
At least he used to. We'll see here going forward with him on that. But it doesn't shock me that this was the compensation. I don't think the Seahawks overpaid in any respect. And Nolan, I will say with 100% certainty, I think that with the acknowledgement here that you're not looking at Nix, Penix, and you're not looking at JJ McCarthy, that, okay, then we're getting into that tier 2 range of the quarterbacks in this draft. 2nd, 3rd round, that's Rattler. That's Jordan Travis, maybe depending on where he's at on his health situation. Michael Pratt?
Yeah, Michael Pratt. He's probably in that tier as well with Jordan Travis.
I've got him with a 4th round grade too. But I'll say on all 3 of those guys, if I've got to pick between those 3 guys, I might lean a little bit more to Howell in what he brings. I think he's got better size than Rattler. I think he's got better mobility than Rattler. And I don't think Rattler's got him beat by like arm strength. So, maybe a little bit more efficient throwing motion, a little more, snappier on that. But I'll take Hal if I've got to pick between the three.
Yeah, I think I would take Travis. I really like Travis.
That's
maybe
fair.
I wouldn't because he broke his leg and I don't know how he's going to come back, but it seems like he'll come back okay.
Michael Science seems to do pretty good with the breaks. It's the ligaments and the, tearing those off the bone that seems to be the problem ones that they can't quite get right, But I like Travis too. I think it's a fair one to look at on it. I just do. I think I'm watching how last year and the way he played with us, I thought he played really gutsy. He was under a lot of pressure even at times and thought he dealt with it well. Loved his ability to kind of get away. And despite, like you said, not being maybe more that Tim Tebow guy. And you always got to love a quarterback that's gritty. He's got a little bit of that old school Dave Craig kind of thing going for him a little bit there, Brennan. Mm-hmm. That appeals to me too. I know I'm going old school on you with that one, but it just is.
I hear you.
But thank you, Nolan. I'm glad to hear you're on board with this as well, as I think probably the majority are pretty hyped on this one. There's a couple of people who are naysayers, but a few hyped. God's Gang, thank you for the $5 donation. I appreciate you for that, God's Gang. People being haters straight up on Howell. I love the move myself. Upside is huge. He was leading the league in yards. If we can get the INTs down, who knows? It's a great point. Through 12 weeks last year, your league leader in yards passing in the NFL was Sam Howell.
Right.
So it wasn't that he had this bad season. I know the 21 interceptions looms large over the top of the kid, but it wasn't just some purely awful season on his part where he just looked inept, lost, unable to play the position.
Right. And, there's that theory. There's that theory that people have that there are probably 100 people out in the world at any given time who are capable of playing effective quarterback in the NFL, but so many of them got one chance in the wrong place at the wrong time, didn't look good, and then they never got another chance.
Yeah.
Like, Geno Smith was almost that, right? Geno Smith is a great example of that. Thinking about quarterbacks in my life that I've seen play, I think that some of them would have failed no matter what, like Ryan Leaf, Jamarcus Russell. Of course, they fail wherever they go. Johnny Manziel. But I can also think of a lot who I think maybe could have had success if they had just found a better situation, a better place, something more suited to what they were doing. Like Matt Leinart. I think Matt Leinart could have at least been a decent pro if he had landed in a better place. Mm-hmm. Vince Young, modern NFL probably would have understood him better.
Certainly. Yeah. Time that there's one that's even beyond situation. Sometimes timing with your skill set and what you're bringing versus what the league maybe or may not be ready for on that side of it. I think certainly it weighs heavy.
Yeah. And like, I know Michael Vick is kind of an NFL legend, but to me, he was kind of a failure in the NFL because it just never really manifested itself in anything over the top great. Like, I think if he comes along today, you would do the things with him that you did with Lamar Jackson. I think that Michael Vick had a better arm than Lamar Jackson by a pretty good margin, at least a stronger arm. I think in his prime, he was faster than Lamar Jackson. So I'm like, I think Vick could have done what Lamar's doing right now, maybe better.
I think you're right. And the common denominator on this, Brendan, even if you go to a guy like Michael Vick, this does even apply to him back in the day, is it seems like there's kind of three things going on at once that all serve to allow those quarterbacks to fail in their first stop. A defensive-minded head coach, a dysfunctional organization going through a period where they just can't get a lot of things right and everything's going wrong. Maybe it's for a 5-6 year stretch. Maybe it's for 20, 30 straight years. But that's also happening. And then a lack of really good talent usually on their side of the ball to make things go, or not utilizing their skill set to the utmost. In Vic's case, very run heavy, and they did what they could with him, but they just turned him into a running back a lot. And that was Mora, of course, Brendan, when he walked in the door, right? That was the junior Mora, who didn't necessarily prove to be the greatest of offensive minds.
Yeah, they were trying to put Vic in the West Coast offense. It was, admirable, but it was a bad idea. Like, I understand why they tried to do it, but they're trying to fit Michael Vick into this hole, into this circular hole when he's a square peg. And you see what the Ravens have done with Lamar, where they fully understand what they have, and they've had tremendous success with it. I know they haven't won a Super Bowl yet, but I think they're getting everything they can out of him and then some.
Agreed. Agreed. And I think that they used Vick's legs to a degree, but I just don't, like you said, I don't think it was much about building around this unique skill set in the NFL. It was more about just, okay, do the things we want you to do within the context of this offense. And so be it Geno Smith, Drew Lock, Michael Vick, or Howell in this situation, all three of those guys, I think to some varying degree, were dealing with those parameters at play. And it serves to just, I think, for a young quarterback, upend them, Brendan, before they really have an opportunity to be successful. It's doing the opposite of setting themselves up for success. It's putting them up to fail. So when they fail, we shouldn't take them as being busts or failures, but in fact, maybe look at them a little bit like, look, they may end up being that, but this is not the situation to make that kind of determination. Much like I'd say Justin Fields. I don't think you can make that determination with Justin Fields. Multiple coaches changed over, multiple different offenses, didn't build up the offensive line, didn't get him good skill position players, a bad defense for most of his time there. They get him a defensive-minded coach after first having an offensive-minded coach. None of it makes any sense. And you can't make really it's easy to blame just one guy and point the one guy and go, that's the bad guy right there. But you go, is that the bad guy? Is he the one that got it wrong here? Is he the one that was really off on it? Maybe it's the case.
Yeah. And, I'm personally very low on Justin Fields. I don't think he would be good, but you never know. Like even a guy like, Mac Jones, what if he doesn't have to deal with Matt Patricia as his co-offensive coordinator with, who was the other guy? Because Belichick that one year had the triumvirate of,
it was Bill O'Brien, I think, right?
Yeah, if he doesn't have to deal with Matt Patricia as his co-OC for that 1 year, is he in a better place now?
Well, he had to your point, Josh McDaniels, when he had legitimate OC there year one, that was the best season of Mac Jones.
Yeah, he made the Pro Bowl. He was good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it's a big factor. I think it weighs in heavily. And in both the case of Fields and Mac, I'm not big on either of those guys, but I can say, hey, I understand their situation. And then where you're set up for stuff that's not going to make it easy for you to do your job. And it's already hard enough to learn the hardest position in the NFL as a young player, to learn it in situations where you don't have the good coaching, or you don't have the good supported cast around you, or the right scheme, or failing parts in different places on the team, or all of that happening at once. It's no shocker when that guy then doesn't necessarily rise, like cream to the crop and just start taking over.
Mm-hmm. Right.
A few quarterbacks could. Thank you, God's gang. Appreciate you for that. Well said on your part as well. Random McDaniel, well, thank you for another $2 donation. He says, Sam lost 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and his linemen his last year. Indeed. Indeed. In fact, I've got the list. It was Michael Carter, Javonte Williams was taken in the second round, but both of those running backs were drafted. De'Ami Brown and Daz Newsome. And those were 2 of his other skill receiver position players that were also drafted in that draft after his sophomore year. And then he went into his senior year. They went away from the spread-based concepts. He lost his playmakers. So the dip wasn't like where it was like with Levis, Brendan, where Will went in that last year. And yeah, he lost a couple guys the prior year, but Kentucky's Kentucky. It was just that he really started to kind of go a little bit tank style a little bit in that final year. This is not that case. This was, I've lost everything. I've got to put the world on my shoulder like Atlas. Let me see if I can Superman this thing every week.
Right. So yeah, there are some reasons why things went down the way they did. Now, I'll say this. If I had to bet on Sam Howell becoming a franchise quarterback, I would bet no. I don't think he will be a franchise quarterback, but I can definitely be incorrect on that. I could definitely lose that bet.
Yeah. And it's a low cost, like a penny stock from the Hawks standpoint of, if they're out the penny stock, no big loss. Right. It's hard to be like, you go, well, we lost the equivalent of a 5th rounder. That is such a huge gaping wound in your drafting ability now for the few years. How are you going to overcome that loss of a 5th rounder? How will we possibly get through the muck of having just such a light draft without that 5th round pick mid to halfway through the 5th round, where, it's like, I'll throw those to the wind right and left and not be the least feel the least bit bad about it, especially for the quarterback position, which is so very important.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Thank you, Randall, for all your donations today on the channel, man. Very kind. Triple donations over there. Amazing Mario Brothers with a $2 dono says, what's the best nation in the world? Donation. That's right, baby. Let's go.
That's a good one.
Go. I like that one. I visited that nation often, so I definitely very appreciative of her and her lands. Thank you, Mario Brothers. Dylan Sosa with a $5 donation. Thanks, Dylan. Says, hoping we get Edrin Cooper or Tyler Nubin. They are studs. You've had a chance to watch both those guys so far, right? Check them out.
Yeah. I'm a big Tyler Nubbin guy. I think he's perfect for this Mike McDonald defense too. Big fan.
I am as well. Love me some Nubbin. I need
Mhm.
some Nubbin. I need some Nubbin. Reminds me of the old buckwheat Eddie Murphy bit that he did on Saturday Night Live. Remember when he
Oh
did
yeah,
I
I
need some
remember that.
Nubbin with my Nubbin. Give me some of that Nubbin. Edrin Cooper, Junior Colson, have you made your decision yet, Brennan? I mean, it's hard, right? It's like picking between ice cream and cake. What are you going to do here? Are you going Coop or are you going Cole?
I think Cooper's probably the better prospect, but I do think that Colson probably aligns more with what we're going to be looking for. I kind of feel like that for some reason.
That's a fair way of putting it. So if you were in charge, would you then take Cooper on that, or would you say no, but just because he does fit the Colson fits better than roll with the Coles?
I'll go with. I'm pretty happy with Colson, man. I think I'm leaning Colson, which I usually don't do, but Mike McDonald just got here. We got to make him feel good. We got to make him feel comfortable. And what better way to make him feel comfortable than a guy that that McDonald loves from Michigan?
Gosh, could you imagine they managed to trade back like twice in the first round, gets the back of the first round after 2 trade backs, then get them Colson to start things off. Hawk fans would probably be a lot less nervous, I think, on certain things coming through on this draft to that point, because the stage is really set for you to roll off value base if they could do something like that. But can't go wrong with Cooper. Can't go wrong with Colson, Dylan. I have them both, like Brendan said. He made a good argument on it. I think it's fine one to say, look, Edrin might have the more upside. Colson might have the higher floor, and then he's got the familiarity with the scheme. But both of those guys are tremendous players that can do it all in the football field, have a good size, can run sideline to sideline ranginess, tackle, and they can cover. Not a lot of real holes in their game. I mean, with Colson, he's just not much of a blitzer necessarily, but really good players, and I'll take them all day, Dylan, especially if it's on the back of trading back a couple times to pick up more picks in that top 100 area of things.
Right.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you for that. Codad, thank you for the $14 Canadian there. Appreciate you for the super sticker. It doesn't have any comment. Put it on your donation, just the $14 super sticker on that. So thank you for that super chat. Very kind of you, Codad, as I know you're a longtime supporter on both of our channels on that side of things. Jessica Butler, thank you for the $2 donation. Says, where do you see us going with linebacker in free agency?
Devondre Campbell.
Wow.
We have Green Bay's former linebacker coach, Oluwatimi, who coached Campbell up to his all-pro season a couple years ago, after kind of just wandering around the league for a couple years, by the way, in Atlanta and Arizona, I think.
Right.
And also he was cut, which means it does not affect the compensatory picks.
So great point on that.
Make it happen.
Do we have the money to get him in here?
If not, we can create it. It's not that hard. It's not even that big of a deal. And I think we do, but we also don't have nearly enough information to know for a fact. I don't think he's going to be that expensive. He's in somewhat aging linebacker. Like those guys, they don't get that much. Like look at Denzel Perryman. Every year he signs for like the minimum and then goes out there and plays well. And nobody ever thinks, hey, maybe I should give this guy some real money.
I feel like he's at about a 1.4.
Yeah, I would do that. I think we can afford that.
Okay. And I'm not down. I'm with it too. And certainly what it would do is if you do get Campbell along with the signing, which we'll be talking about today, Jessica, that we did, because we did just do a signing of a linebacker today, Jessica. But that would then set the stage for you, at least if you did get Campbell with the guy you got today, Brendan, to go into the draft and not be pulled to the Colson Cooper situation. If there was another player you liked of better value at that point sitting in the draft, just frees you up a little bit more further for a guy to dip and drop potentially at a different, less likely position, I suppose, on that. So Campbell's as good as any other one, Jessica. I mean, you mentioned Denzel Perryman, who I do believe is still kind of out there and seems to be pretty decent at pretty much any place, he stops. Oren Burks is a guy that filled in for the 49ers last year, though he was filling in more as the Will than the Mike. So I don't know if he would be as much of a possibility, but I was pretty impressed by him and his play at the Niners when he was out there and going, and he wouldn't cost a lot of money. It is a thin group though, right, Brendan? I mean, there's not, as far as free agent middle linebackers go at this point, it's gotten pared down pretty good.
Troy Reeder is still out there, the Ram.
Okay. Yeah.
Jerome Baker, but he's small. Like he might be a little too small. I think he's like 220 or something.
Yeah. Reeder strikes me as a guy a little bit undersized too. He always feels like a couple
Yeah.
inches and 20
There's
pounds off.
still Isaiah Simmons, but I don't know what he's going to cost. I have no idea.
He's an interesting one. He's got such an interesting skill set, and you go, boy, but maybe Mike saw what happened in Wink Martindale, his mentor's defense with Isaiah, and he went, nah.
Yeah,
that doesn't seem. But those are kind of the names, Jessica. I mean, it's those. You don't have much to turn over at this point. I think there's even much likelihood as ever right now that the Hawks probably end up double dipping in the draft at the middle linebacker position. You probably end up picking a guy early and a guy late, or a couple guys late. And this has, of course, been a little bit of their mode the past couple of drafts. Multiple cornerbacks in the draft, multiple tackles in a draft. We have multiple running backs in the draft, multiple edges in the draft, kind of. So you've definitely gone down this road before, as far as not just going to and one positioning it down the line with every single pick through your given draft. I think they will do this with this in this upcoming one.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you, Jessica. Revenger 32. He says Sam Howell equals Matt Flynn. Then we draft our quarterback. There we go.
Yeah. I mean, except with Matt Flynn, you're not taking on a significant at the time contract, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's
exactly.
complete. It's almost entirely risk-free. I'm not going to say totally risk-free, but it's close.
Yeah. I mean, that's the difference there, Revenger. I think I like what you're thinking on that. The stage, this sets the stage to drafting the quarterback, I think, is at the heart of what your donation's at there. And I don't know how much 35,000 IDR is, by the way.
$2.24.
There we go.
Revenger's donated a couple times on my channel this week, so I actually know the conversion rate for the rupiah.
I love the rupiah. That's awesome. So there's the donate. You put significant money. I mean, even considering that was 12 years ago, and you gave Flynn the 4-year, $26 million deal, which still looks kind of expensive 13 years later. It still looks pricey, Brendan. But he's also a better player than Flynn. Better arm talent, more mobility, a better track record coming out of college of success than Flynn had. Who didn't have bad success, but I mean, Howell was kind of prolific coming out of college. You throw for 10,000 yards in 3 years. That's 90 touchdowns. That's the ACC at that, by the way, not just out at the South Dakota State, back end, whatever conference. So you're right, Revenger. I think this sets the stage. I like what this does as well as you go into next offseason. And what if they go through the year finding that Sam Howell's able to progress as a player and be really close? Not that he becomes your quarterback of the future, but then to your point, Revenger, that you have a guy that you feel like going into next offseason, like, okay, well, we don't feel like we're solidly on Geno's boat at this point. Geno's getting older. Now we can get out from Geno's contract into year 3 of this deal as we're about to enter into it and actually save some substantial money. We roll with Sam Howell, draft the quarterback, and then we have the position at a very cheap rate, at the very least, moving on into 2025. If at that time we pick our quarterback, and boy, you would be able to maximize out the rest of the roster, wouldn't you, Brendan, with how little you'd be spending into the QB position at that point.
Right. Absolutely. I see it playing out kind of that way, by the way.
I do too. That's kind of the way I see this going down the line as well. So thank you, Revenger, for that donation, and love where your mind's at on this one. Love where your head's at on this. Mark Mason, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, is the Tyrell Dodson signing meaningful?
I think he's going to start, so I would say very meaningful.
I agree with Brendan on this one, Mark. We don't have any real good competition on the back end behind him. He is a will linebacker. He's not a Mike. So this does point you to will more than it points you to that. Okay, now the Mike's filled. Now we got to go find the will guy. But he's a good player. I watched a little bit of his tape, and we'll be talking about a little bit more of him in depth as we get through these chronological signings here, Brendan or Mark. But he's a really good multifaceted player. He can play the run. He can play the pass. Really smart in zone. Watched him a couple times, Brendan, actually play a flood zone concept and play it legit. Pick the one guy up, peel off that guy, pick the other guy up coming into his zone. It was like, wait. What am I seeing here? You know what I mean? Give me the wipers. Is this a linebacker can play it this way? So he's impressive. I think that he's coming out as the number 1 PFF linebacker in football last year. I think if anybody's getting too caught up in that, they're going to get lost in the sauce on that one, but still had a strong year for them, filling in for Matt Milano when he went down to a season-ending injury. And I like his play. He's going to, I think, fill in nice.
Yeah. Need to see those contract details, though, before we really know how to feel.
True, it could be a bit pricey. I don't know if he was going to have a huge market though, being that this was not a 1 year of production and then a half season of 1 year production at that 500
Yeah.
snaps. So is there really a huge market out there for a guy like that, as far as, or a pricey market out there for a guy like that?
Ask Matt Flynn.
That's true. Wow, that's a good point. He only needed 1 game, right? Was it
Right.
the six touchdown game or something? And that what he pulled
Yeah.
off?
He owns like every Packers single game record, I think. So.
Yes, he does. Never seen 1 game earn a man so much money as that, I think, in my life in football. It was just absolutely insane. So, yes, it is a meaningful signing, though, Mark. This is your starter. You'll get competition probably at the draft, like I'm saying. I think we are going to get a Mike, and I think you probably get another guy that'll be a Will guy to fight this. It's probably a 1 year deal you're giving Tyrell. But you give Tyrell the destination where he gets to be the clear-cut starter where he goes. He has a year to earn his value. You got a guy in kind of a prove-it mode. In fact, that's where a lot of the roster is going to be now with a lot of these contracts, is in kind of that prove-it mode. You're only got the 1 year contract. You need to go out and earn your next deal. So make sure you're in tip-top shape. Make sure you're doing an offseason where you're getting everything done right, because you're always a little bit in a nervous place, Brendan, when you're on those 1 year deals in the NFL as a football player, right?
Right. And, to a certain extent, you bring in Mike McDonald. He's the linebacker whisperer, the same way that Pete Carroll was the DB whisperer. You shouldn't be spending $20 million on inside linebackers. You should be asking, okay, you got to find your diamond in the rough, just like Pete had to go find his Cam Chancellor, his Richard Sherman. Go find yours. And that means,
KJ
no, we're
Wright.
not going to dump. It means we're not going to dump a ton of money into this position. And by the way, relatively undervalued position in the modern NFL, off-ball linebacker. Doesn't matter like it used to. Most of the successful teams do not spend heavily at that position, I feel like.
They don't. I think especially, Brendan, at the will. Because, I mean, I think they will spend at the mic. You will get guys like Roquan who gets paid, and a couple of middle linebackers get paid, but even the next guys down below those top end mics don't get paid, Brendan. So you're right, to even Jonathan Menz, but the wills especially, who's getting paid at the will linebacker role across the NFL? I mean, Queen just saw a guy that was supposed to be at 18 million signed at what, 14, 13 and a half, something like that. And so it's hard for those guys to establish their value out there and what they're worth and deserving. It's kind of tough. It's the same thing that happened to KJ. It's like, KJ had a great career, but it's like, how do you, let's have this talk with Chad. I think it's one of the, everyone gives the running backs a bunch of like sympathy, Brendan, and safeties now are getting a bunch of like, here, let us give you a napkin to dry your tears for how devalued you are. Nobody gives a lick for will linebackers. Nobody gives a lick for the fact that, one of those guys has gone to the Hall of Fame in the last 30 years, never appreciated, never loved on.
It's tough, but it makes sense when you think about it. Most of the wills, like you said it, the only Hall of Fame will of the last 25 years is Derek Brooks, right?
That's all I've got on the books with it. Yeah. Everybody else that's a inside off ball linebacker has been a middle linebacker, a Mike. So thank you, Mark. Appreciate you for that. Jessica Butler with another $2 donation. Thank you for that, Jessica. The multi-double donation from you as well. Says, do you see us trying to grab an edge in free agency?
Not anymore.
Yeah, not anymore.
Although Daryl Taylor's deal, and we'll talk about Daryl Taylor in a second here, is basically completely non-guaranteed.
Good.
We could yoink it and he'd only get like 20 grand.
Okay, good. Then
so
maybe
it's on the menu. Yeah. I kind of feel like that's a hedge in case Dallas Turner is there at 16. They don't want to have to be like, oh, we can't take Dallas Turner because we extended Daryl Taylor. So we're going to make sure he only gets a tiny guarantee so we can easily just pull it.
Yeah. And he didn't get anything as far as he's basically vet minimum, right?
He got exactly what the restricted tender would have been, which is like 3.1.
Okay.
And they also threw some incentives in there as well. But it's basically like we tendered him, except he got 20K guaranteed instead of 0 guaranteed. So I don't know. Maybe he really needed that $20,000 and they were just trying to help him out. Maybe he owed on some credit cards and they were like, just take care of it.
Well, sometimes those guys don't know how much the taxes are going to hit for. And it's like, wait, I only have half of what I was getting on my signing. How's that work? So maybe it's still a chance. I tell you, I'd get the bat phone on right now, Brendan. I'd send some Morse code out there to Clowney. I'd be like, hey, just sit around and wait to May 1st. Okay. Let's dig this, JD. Hang out to May 1st. Okay. We'll get you the same contract right now that you'd get right now. Just chill out till we can get past the compensatory part of this thing.
Yeah, I would love to do that too, believe me. But he'll be more expensive than Taylor for sure. So you're gonna have to save a little bit of space for that. And I think that I kind of feel like they're just trying to keep their options open in case Dallas Turner's there at 16.
Makes sense. I think there's very much some of that going on there too. So it's probably not likely they're to do it, Jessica. I hope they're open to it if the price. I mean, as we've seen with Clowney before, Brendan, he's lasted on the market before. The price has come down on him on the market before, where you don't have to do the multi-year deal, where he can be the gun for hire situation. So if it, all things being equal, when it comes down to that, I would certainly jump at that possibility, especially when you get outside the compensatory aspect of this. But it would look on the surface of it with the Taylor. To Brendan's point on this, Jessica, with the Taylor's renegotiation, him being firmly refitted back here, it would seem like they're going, okay, we're going to try to rock with him as your fourth edge, which I really don't want to see him on the field next year, but the team likes him a little bit for the time being, at least maybe in that possibility if they can't. But Turner's a guy. If he's there, I think the team jumps. I don't think they move back in the draft. I think they'll like him enough to just jump on him and feel like, wow, we got the best edge in the draft at 16. I almost guarantee you that's what Schneider will say if he got Taylor at 16.
Right. I agree.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you very much. Well, let's keep it on motoring on through here, Brendan, as we start to turn this over now into to day 2 of free agency here.
Well, at the very end of day 1 was the Leonard Williams extension.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, my bad. Got lost there on that one. So we got Leonard Williams on the finally comes in the final day of the hour there. So we're waiting through. We knew that there were some furious negotiations. Pretty big deal, Brendan.
I mean, it's not what we wanted, but that what we wanted was also determined before Chris Jones and before Christian Wilkins. So it started to kind of feel like something like this could happen. I was hoping that maybe it wouldn't. I thought that, it's a little bit of a false equivalency to compare Leonard Williams to Chris Jones, right? Like, they're not the same player at all, but there was a trickle down. Chris Jones was the tide that raises all. What's the saying? The rising tide.
Tide raises all boats.
Right. So sometimes you just got to go with it. When the market changes like that, you can either be, the senior citizen at McDonald's wondering why everything doesn't cost 15 cents anymore, or you can just go, hey, this is what it costs now. Either I spend this or I don't get it. And we decided to go ahead and go with it. 3 years, $64.5 million. That's $21.5 million a year. First year cap hit 10.4. Second year cap hit 29. Third year cap hit 25, which is kind of interesting. They did like the big thing in the second year instead of the third year. But what we really care about right now is that first year, 10.4. Fine. Nothing wrong with that.
You convert the base to the bonus in that second. That's what he's thinking. You see that, right?
Yeah, they probably will do that.
Right. And then you split that half down on the year 2. And not that they'll necessarily 100% do it, Brendan, but if they're in we want to, it's like the lock it base to bonus move this year a little bit.
Right. So, I'm not thrilled about it, but you got to do what you got to do. And if we had moved off of Leonard Williams and gotten another really good defensive lineman, we would have either paid about the same amount probably, or had to settle for a much lesser player like a Sheldon Rankins.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. And which is not something I was willing to do or wanted to do. You either?
No, I did have an eye on DJ Reader, but even he, I think, is a downgrade from Leonard Williams.
Yes, I do agree. So Eric Armstead's a possibility, but he did just get a pretty big solid signing contract from the Jacksonville Jaguars, I believe it, albeit cheaper than what I think Williams got. Still, pretty big deal nonetheless for a guy that's got much more of an injury risk, I think, in what he's bringing to the table.
Yeah. Is Armstead a tackle or a 5-tech?
He's kind of a 3-tech, 5-tech, and give you an occasional 1-tech too. They'll move him all around on that line, so to speak. So he gives you a little bit of everywhere on that. A little more so even than Leonard Williams, where you get probably a little more 1-tech snaps from him than you could Leonard, but both of them kind of give you a little bit of if you want to get kind of funky with your alignments.
Right. So yeah, that was Leonard Williams. Again, I didn't love it, but it is what it is. And that was the end of day one.
Yeah. And I'll just say really quickly on this that, I did a video where I looked through and just double checked again on like the last 2 years of contracts, Brendan, and there's so many defensive tackles, not named Jones, not named Donald, who had these kind of monster contracts being given out. And John spoke about it today on an interview we'll touch on a little bit later, but he talked a little bit about how when you just look at the franchise tag alone and the rising cost there that exists in the franchise tag, that this is a position that has raised as other positions have devalued. And I'm not as worried. The last little part of this, Brendan, is I'm not worried about his age really in the least. He's not yet 30 years old until June. And there's a lot of these defensive tackles recently who've come in and been able to play really good through their early 30s. You're not going to rely on a guy maybe when he's 34, 35, even though we did and got away with it with Al Woods. But he still should be good for the next couple of years. This shouldn't just be a one-year deal move. If we're going for it in 2025, this guy's going to be a strong part to what we do on the defensive line.
No reason to believe otherwise.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. All right, let's keep it moving here. We get ourselves into day 2 here. We haven't done anything in outside free agency right now. We have Seahawks fans grabbing pitchforks and sharpening them in their blacksmith room. And we've got torches being lit with kerosene lamps. But we finally get to the first move of the day, don't we? Or the first move, an outside free agency on that day.
Right. We do eventually get there, but we have to wade through a lot to get there first. They made us wait again, man. They made us wait. Damian Lewis signed with the Panthers for way more than I was willing to give him, so no issues there.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of conversation about how the guard market went crazy this year. Even Schneider talked about it a little bit earlier, where these guards are just getting paid like crazy. So as much as I'm worried about the interior offensive line this year, I am happy that we're not chasing these obscene overpays in the free agency market.
Yeah, you're not getting a Damian Lewis is not a Leonard Williams equivalency over on the guard. I know he didn't quite get the Leonard Williams contract, but it was pretty funny money to me for what Lewis has been as a player, in my opinion. And so I kind of sit there scratching my head on that one, going, I agree with John on this one. It's much different to where you have to pay for this level of quality to the defensive tackles. You want a guy that's in that Ed Oliver, Jeffrey Richardson, this area of things. That's what you got to pay for. It's another thing we were talking about, a kind of a little bit above mid guard, making huge kind of money. And I mean, geez, the Dolphins deal they gave out. I liked me some Robert Hunt, Brennan, but
no, that was the Panthers too. That's the thing. That's the thing that makes it so weird. So I guess Damian Lewis is playing left guard again because Robert Hunt is a right guard. So, Damian Lewis can't catch a break. He wants to go back to the right side, but nobody's going to let him be him.
No. Just going to get abused by Twitchy 3 texts for the foreseeable future, Brennan. And again, real quick for just your points on this one, I want to hear where you're coming from, but this is another one of those learn the lesson of what bad organizations do and why it is so bad to do this. Go get the quarterback. Go get the quarterback. The jumping for wanting to get the QB gets you into a predicament. And it's the predicament of chasing your tail as an organization. Rather than setting the table, you've thrown the food on the table and now you're trying to put it up on the plates. And that's just what the Panthers are doing. Are they not, Brendan? Tell me if I'm wrong on this. But you go get Bryce Young before you really truly set the stage here with not only the skill position players on the outside, but also having the offensive line in place. And now here you are a year later, chasing hard to kind of correct that mistake and get back out ahead of it because it was so bloody bad in his first season. Am I crazy on that one?
No, I think what Carolina is doing is a little bit of a disaster. I know they're having fun right now, but I don't think they're going to be having fun when the season starts.
Yeah, agreed.
Nice trade for Deontay Johnson, I guess. That was pretty good, but
yeah. I mean, I to me though, it's like you've gone from DJ Moore now to Adam Thielen and Deontay Washington. Like you get it dealt with, Carolina. You get the line and then get the players, but this is the thing where to me it's you get everything set first, then get the QB, and you don't get yourself into this thing where one desperate decision begats another one. And I think that's what's happened to them. I think that's a little bit of what's happened to Chicago is now they have not only are they moving on from a Fields that they don't know if he's good or not, Brendan, but they can't even get value for the guy.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that team being good with that owner, isn't it? It's just really hard to imagine them finding a way to be good.
He's too busy dumping drinks on fans, man,
Right.
And telling them who to draft.
Yeah.
telling them who to draft.
That's more important.
Yeah, I suppose the ego's the matters there.
Okay, so DJ Dallas went to the Cardinals for much more money than I was expecting him to get. Surprised he's still in the league, but good for him. Keep getting them checks.
Yeah. Get it, do it. Do you, DJ. And Arizona's not a bad place to live. So,
yeah. Drew Lock went to the Giants, presumably because he'll probably end up playing like 10 games because Daniel Jones is going to tear his Achilles at some point. It's just inevitable.
I wonder if the Giants draft JJ McCarthy and then post June 1st designate Daniel Jones.
Wow. Maybe. I mean, some people were talking about that a little bit. Man.
Like the Russell Wilson thing just kind of buries it. That's what they're probably going to think is they're going to be like, no one will be talking about the Daniel Jones dead money that we have to sustain here because everybody's too busy beating the hell out of the dead horse that is the Denver Broncos on what they did with Russ.
Let me say this, though. I know Drew Lock's probably excited. He'll probably end up getting to play this year, but that is not a good situation. You got no receivers. You got no offensive line. You don't have a running back anymore. Your best playmaker is probably Darren Waller, who almost retired this offseason. So I don't see anything good happening for Drew Lock over there. I'll put it to you that way.
Yeah, I think you encapsulated it probably pretty well. I mean, you're going to be under a lot of duress. The line hasn't pass protected. You got Dable screaming at you as you come off the field. Definitely going to be a bit of a different environment from the QB friendly place that this recently been here in Seattle.
And then we laid down some tenders on restricted and exclusive rights free agents. Miles Adams, who I think kind of rounds out the defensive end room, the three tech room, so to speak. We tendered Brady Russell, who I think he's going to lose that tender at some point as well. I think we tendered a couple other guys like Onu Giogu. Nothing really significant. And remember, the tenders get pulled away at any time and we owe no money. So a lot of those guys are probably just being held on to until we draft their replacement.
Yeah, because we came into this with 44 rostered players. So you had to do some of this to just kind of roster up the players, make sure you have enough guys to just function OTAs.
And then we finally went outside of our organization to find a guy, Pharaoh Brown, a tight end. I spoke about him a little bit during the lead up to free agency. I was aware of who he was. Pharaoh Brown, formerly of the New England Patriots, signs a 1-year deal, 3.2, could go up to 3.9 million. Tight end, going to be a backup to Noah Fant. And basically in a 24-hour span, the Seahawks sewed up their tight end position pretty much completely. So that was nice because we had concerns going into this offseason there, I think.
Boy, I think we did definitely. I mean, you're empty at any position, Brendan. You're kind of starting to freak out a bit.
Right.
Oh, good Lord.
But basically, he's a blocking tight end. He's a good one. Seems to be more of a run blocker than a pass protector. I was looking at some PFF splits. Like 71% of his snaps last year were blocking, and of those snaps, more than, I want to say 75% were run blocking snaps. So that is what he does in this league. He's a blocker. Several accounts on X that are like Patriots fans and Patriots analysts were saying, we think he's one of the best blockers in the blockers at the position in the league. Schneider said that he believes he's a top 3 blocking tight end in this league. And that's a skill set that is certainly valued right now because the blocking with these tight ends is really starting to go away. So I'm pretty on board with it. It does give us some options in 12 personnel. It also gives us, because Fant's not a blocker. I know he's blocked a little bit better than we expected since he got here, but he's not a blocker. And Pharaoh Brown is a guy who clearly fills that role. He's not a terrible pass catcher either. I am a little bit concerned about there being a little bit of a tell in the offense, depending on which tight end is on the field at any given time. But I will say this. I do think that Pharaoh Brown, he's not a complete lost cause out running routes. I will say that.
Yeah, I to me, it was more of that. That's what rounded me back to believing that this is more about a 12 personnel commitment thing more than is about, you'll tell between the tight ends being flicked around in and out between who plays. He's a true inline guy too versus Fant, who's an H-back, move tight end, off ball tight end. But he's a good player, Brendan. I mean, good overall. When you throw him the ball, he catches it. It seems like he had a pretty major injury in college that tore a couple of ligaments that really robbed him some of his, maybe some of the athleticism and speed, as we've seen with some of those guys, you don't maybe always get that back. But also with that, Brendan, maybe that's a little bit of why it's taken him some time to round into shape in the NFL and find, whatever maybe potential is there. So he does give you a little sparkle of potential catching ability. I think he's not just a completely nothing burger when it comes to that. He's had a couple seasons where he's been a okay pass catcher, though, and again, not used heavily, again, to your point on that. So he's definitely, when you look at the snap count, not just last year, but throughout his career, every year of his career, used way more as a blocker than out there running routes, but still supplies something you need to have on the team. And like you said, looking at these scouting these tight ends in this given draft, I can probably point out like 2 or 3 of them that are legitimately really good blockers, and the rest of them that are just kind of out there getting ragdolled around or trying to put a lot of effort into it, but don't have a lot to supply as far as push or cementing their block.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's a couple guys that I liked, but you have no guarantee you're going to be able to get them. And I'm sure that they were looking at this tight end room like, okay, we have to have something. We can't just be stuck with Noah Fant, and then we end up getting like Westover and asking him to block in UDFA or something like that, because that worked in college. That's not going to work in the NFL. Grubb needed at least one tight end who could credibly block at the NFL level.
And if there's one first round grade on a tight end, and there's most people have basically 1 second round grade on tight ends, what that's going to do is mean that these team hungry tight ends that are out there in this league are going to jump on those other guys much earlier than you want to from a value-based standpoint within the drafts. The scarcity, the supply and demand will cause them to be pulled, and you don't want to get caught into that game in the draft.
Absolutely. And I think the objective right now is to get to the point where you are freed up to take BPA in the draft, or close to BPA.
100%.
Mm-hmm. All right. So after the Pharaoh Brown signing, that basically led us into day 3, I think. Yeah. So things feeling just a little bit different. And we actually punched in a signing early in the morning. Like before most people were awake, we punched something in. And this was definitely the Scott Huff influence, because he signed one of his former UW guys. Interior offensive lineman, mostly center, but also a little bit of right guard, Nick Harris.
Nick Harris. And was he there for Nick Harris because wasn't Grubb just 2 years in UW? Okay.
Oh no, so, Scott Huff. Scott Huff was there.
Scott Huff, my bad. Right. Yeah. Okay, you're right. He was there. Yes.
Yes. So Nick Harris was about 2.5 million, could go up to 3.26. Obviously, we're hoping he doesn't play because he's going to be a backup. He provides depth at 2 different positions. Undersized, but not critically so. He's like 293, I think. That's pushing it, but I think it's okay, especially when you're in a zone scheme. And he's very good in space. He's very good on the move. He's very good lane blocks at the second level. Cleveland would use him as a fullback on some snaps. They would actually just have him as some jumbo lead blocker, which, I mean, that's fun. That's a lot of fun. And I don't know if we're going to do that, but it indicates the kind of mobility that he has.
Well, I can attest. There's Hawk fans that are dying for some fullback action. They don't care if it's going to be a lineman. They don't care if it's a defensive lineman. Just give us some fullback love in the whole clearing linebackers out and decleating them. So, they would love to see that. And you're touching the important point here. You have to have interior linemen that can move. One of the reasons Damian Lewis was not retained is because he can't move. And all those screens that the Stefanski was running with the Browns last year, Brendan, they definitely were utilizing that. Get out in front of the blockers, and he does it well. So it's a nice signing for a fit on the scheme.
Yeah. I think that, again, you hope he doesn't play, but clearly this is somebody that Scott Huff, he had to be involved in this decision, of course. So I like it. I like it. He makes things go down just a little bit easier. Now, admittedly, it does probably mean that Oluwatimi is getting handed the starting job for 2024, which I don't love, but I'm fine with it. It's one of those things where if they wanted to go gung-ho, let's go get the best center in free agency or get the best center in the draft, that would have been okay. But I totally understand you maybe needing to take it on faith that Oluwatimi has a good year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think too that what they're doing with this on at certain positions where it looks like they're filling the position, they have the starter, they're set there, they're not going to now go back and address the position, or they've got the backup and the starter. I do think that they are what it is it's to do the true set the roster up in a way where, like you just said a few minutes ago, you're going to the value point, and you do that by having everything's filled as far as need. And then you end up in a spot where you say, okay, well, we just signed Rayshon Jenkins. We got Julian Love, but now we drafted Tyler Newman. And you go, well, yeah, that happened, but that's the value-based draft part of that. And I still think that would apply to the center position. I think it closes it like a crack. The likelihood that you address that with going and drafting center in this draft, Brendan, to your point, I think it definitely lowers it down. But I think if John gets hit on a pick here in this draft where he's looking third, second round, and there's some great center there that's drifted in the draft that they really love, who's a pure scheme fit in his mobility stuff, I think he'll still jump on him.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it's a 1-year deal. It's a 1-year deal, $2.5 million, probably very easy to get out of. But I think it does indicate that Oluwatimi is going to get a clear shot at this starting job.
Yes, 100%.
And I know some people are not going to feel great about that, but I get it. I understand it.
I mean, Oluwatimi, his tape is much like we're talking about with this kid out of UW. His tape's the same way out of Michigan. He was a movement-based center for Michigan and how they used him on the football field. Get out in space, get to the second level, pull out in front, get out in the screen game. So Oluwatimi, though he's taken in the 5th round, part of the reason Oluwatimi drops to the 4th round is he's not then going to be a scheme fit for all of those teams that are looking for the trash can center that can drive a guy off the ball mano-a-mano, one-on-one. Mm-hmm. That will cause him to dip a little bit in the draft. But Oluwatimi has talent. He's got ability. He is untested. But I do believe you're right that this is a little bit of him having the pathway to starting here at this point.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that was that. Next thing, Seahawks re-signed cornerback Artie Burns. 1-year deal, unknown money, probably Vetman because that's what he's got in his last couple contracts. He just kind of hangs around here, doesn't he? He just kind of sticks around. You almost never see him, but he's always there in the background.
He is a guy with a lot of cover 2 split shell familiarity going back to his time with Chicago. And that's where he really was able to capture some of his first round ability at that time. And he came in here, and I think the times he was asked to fill in when he was out there in preseason and they ran him a lot, Brendan, I think he was always showing up and being a player out there out of the slot. I found it interesting, Brendan, though. I did with tendering Michael Jackson. I looked at this draft, and boy, I was just checking out a couple more guys last night where I'm throwing another guy up into the 3rd round. I'm throwing another guy up into the 4th round at the cornerback position. And it's almost like receiver for me between the 3rd and the 5th round for me in this draft and my outlook of the players, in that there's so many guys. There's like 17 receivers for me through the 1st and 3rd rounds in my grades. And from that 3rd to that 5th range in this draft at cornerback, you've got a lot of guys in this. Artie and Michael with Trey and Tariq and Devin Witherspoon, you do remove down a little bit of the likelihood that they go after corner.
Yeah, I think you could make a pretty good argument that one of those guys is either going to go somewhere else or they're going to move positions. Like I'm looking at it because it's Witherspoon, Woolen, and then Kobe Bryant, Trey Brown, and now Artie Burns, Mike Jackson. That's 6 guys.
Yeah.
I feel like one of those guys either needs to convert full-time to safety, or one of those guys needs to be put in a trade, or one of those guys needs to be let go.
Yeah, agreed. I was foresee it the same way. It feels a little stacked on that right now, like too many bodies, not enough spaces.
Right. So that would be my expectation. At some point, one of those guys either moves to safety full on. Everyone seems to expect Kobe Bryant to move to safety, which we have zero evidence one way or the other on that he can do it.
Yeah, I certainly have a little confidence in it. And I don't think Mike McDonald looks at the tape last year and goes, yeah, they were doing it more to me that they were lean there than it was that he was such a good fit there.
Yeah, and maybe Artie Burns, because a lot of corners move to safety when they get older because they're slower, but they still have the instincts. So maybe he moves to safety. I could see that. But,
yeah, me too.
But yeah, something's probably going to happen there. And then, yeah, we did tender Mike Jackson, which I like. I think Mike Jackson's worth $3.1 million all day.
You're going to play some zone stuff. This isn't all about man-based stuff. And when he's on the field last year, he might have been your best overall rated outside of the rookie Witherspoon. He might have been your 2nd best rated corner when it's all said and done. Even with Trey Brown having some of those games like Detroit and Cincinnati where he was playing really strong. He might even be him and both. Didn't he? Wasn't he better graded than both him and Woolen?
He was graded better than Woolen, but Woolen was not graded well at all because his tackling was miserable. but I don't think he beat out Spoon.
Okay.
But he was well graded, and he's a good tackler, which is kind of important right now because that's what we're worried about with Woolen. But yeah, that was good. We also tendered John Radigan at $3 million, which was less good. But it's a tender, so you can withdraw it at any time. What's probably going to happen is that we're going to bring some linebackers on, and then he kind of gets pushed out. Or what happens sometimes, teams negotiate a contract smaller than the tender, and then just pull the tender and put the new contract on him.
I hope they do that because $3 million for Radigan is not something I'd like to pay right now.
Yeah, and interesting one came right after that, like a couple minutes after the Radigan thing. Daryl Taylor, who had already been reported as having been, pushed out, we're moving on. Condota was tweeting, we didn't do anything with Taylor, so he's a free agent now. As it turns out, we actually, instead of tendering him, which would have been about $3.1 million, we gave him a 1-year, $3.1 million contract. So we tendered him, except we didn't tender him. And as near as I can tell, the only thing that's different is that instead of getting guaranteed $20,000 or nothing, he's guaranteed $20,000, and there are some sack incentives in there. So I don't know. That one confuses me a little bit. But to kind of step away from the micro of the move, I'm not terribly excited about having Daryl Taylor continue to be on this team at the end of the day.
I really can't say that I am either. And the part that I think most disappoints me about this is that you do have kind of a necessity for the fourth edge, right, Brendan? It's easy to look at the fourth edge and go, well, that's the fourth guy. I mean, how much you're really going to even use that guy? Or, we'll just put him into a pass rushing role and he'll find that. And he did that okay for us 2 years ago. So he'll fit back in and that'll be fine. Couple problems with that. First off is they did try to do that again with him last year. He had more pass rush snaps than he had run defense snaps, but his run liability showed up glaringly across the board once again. And I just go, man, you could have had a better spot in there at that fourth edge, a guy that's likely to be on the football field. You're going to get an injury that comes up. You're going to lose a guy for 5, 6, 7 weeks. You're going to have a rotation that's necessary to keep guys fresh, the 17th game season, all of that kind of stuff wrapped into this, Brendan. And so it's not just merely having a guy on the roster that's got a little bit of pass rush ability. It's the liability of the guy that you have in your roster in the run game and how much that's going to be exposed anytime that he's on the field. And people have been trying to sell me a bit on, well, Mike McDonald will teach him up. Mike McDonald will find a way to put him in the, I don't know how Mike McDonald does that. I've seen when it comes to Daryl Taylor and his run game liabilities for me, Brendan, it goes deep, it goes far, and it goes wide. It's not just merely that he doesn't have the sand in the pants to root down and set the edge. Doesn't do that. It's not just a matter of he doesn't have the awareness of space of even reading where the ball is at. He doesn't have that. It's also that he just can't flat out tackle a guy one-on-one in space. It is the sort of the trifecta of playing run defense of that just will not allow for there to be really any upside on that. And I'm a pretty positive guy when it comes to most players, but with him, that was a year where he went down as a player. As you're expecting him to be even going further and ascending, he went backwards. And I still maintain, I think he's very much about the same pass rusher he was when he walked in the door, which is a very streaky pass rusher who will have long stretches, Brendan, where he will go cold.
Yeah. I think what happened is they're playing the compensatory game, and they know that signing a veteran like Clowney or a Van Noy or what's another edge, Bud Dupree or anybody like that is going to cost a pick, and it's also going to cost a little more money because those guys are actually good at football, and Taylor's kind of not. So I think they're deciding, okay, we want to save the money and we want to save the pick, so we'll take on this lesser player and give a second coaching staff a shot with him. And maybe they tell him to hit the weight room. Maybe they start Maybe they start injecting some of the, what do they call the calorie powder? Yeah, some protein powder into all of his meals.
The special protein powder.
Yeah. So I don't know. I understand what they're doing. I wish we had just traded him last year when he probably had some value. He had 9.5 sacks 2 years ago. I'll bet we could have traded him for something.
Yeah. We were both talking about this, I think, last year about this is the time to try to move him because his value was at the highest. He was coming off a efficient pass rush year. The sack numbers were in a good place. He had 2 cheap year club control years that you had to use him at that point. And you knew what his deficiencies were by that point. This is one of those things, again, where it comes down to this isn't a guy that's just batted this in. It's like you knew this was going to continue to be an issue. And you kept kind of hoping it would just kind of fix itself. I will be very shocked, Brennan, if he makes the final roster. I will be very shocked if they don't have some other option that they have potentially gone to here.
Yeah. And again, if that happens, he's only owed 20 grand. So not, he'll pay off those credit cards.
There you go.
And I think we'll be cool then. Oh, Rams sign safety Cameron Curl, 2 years, 13 million, just came down the pipe.
That's a good signing for them.
I thought he was going to get way more than that. I think I got a little overzealous in his perception around the league. I don't know.
Well, I like it for them. That's a good value signing for the Rams on that. And they've had I think a pretty strong free agency period. Yeah, I don't know about the Jonah Jack, what was it? What was the one guard? Not the one. Dotson's okay because they knew they had him in house and spending. What was the other one they did? They did the
the other guard that the Rams signed. Hold on here, 1 second here.
Jonah Jackson.
It might have been Jonah Jackson. It wasn't Glasgow. He went back to Detroit, right?
Glasgow went back to Detroit. I think it was Jonah Jackson. It was
Jonah Jackson. Yeah,
that's the one I'm a little less sure on because they gave very close to the same money that they gave to Dotson, and I went, I'm okay with the Dotson, but that one, especially having Avila in there, because now I guess Avila goes to center.
He must.
Which I like Avila better as a left guard, but I'm not going to push back on McVay. He knows better than me on that. Which guy fits better probably where. So he's got the better reading with it. Yeah.
But anyway, so after the Daryl Taylor thing, which it's not enough money for me to be upset about it, be actually angry about it. But I wonder if would you rather have Daryl Taylor as your fourth edge, or would you rather have some guy in the 5th round? I kind of rather would go that 5th round route. Even it's not even a great draft for edges, but I still kind of feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, at least I would think we could find a guy in the 5th round that'll be a run stuffer, Brennan. To me, more than getting the guy that's going to give us pass rush, I think that you're going to get enough pass rush, I think, here when it comes down to it between Mafe, Uchenna, and Derek Hall. They'll give you some pass rush. But there's some guys like Big Landon Jackson, Marshawn Nealand, who the Seattle Seahawks have met with, Brennan Jackson out of WSU. I mean, you've got some big edges that you could apply here that could give you a little bit of that Clowney-like role that he's applied for the Ravens defense in the prior year, at least on early downs as a run stuffer. And that to me is much better than the rotational pass rush you get from Taylor, which is so hit or miss. But like you said, it's not a big SAFU or a big deal. It's fine, and the kid, maybe it turns on, like John Schneider said today, some guys learn at their own speed.
Okay, so after that, we actually hit the 1-2. We actually did some stuff from outside. We did some stuff that was exciting. And it was within 5 minutes of each other. So we finally got the water flowing a little bit here.
Woohoo!
Safety, Rayshon Jenkins, 2 years, $12 million, identical to the Julian Love contract a year ago. So I guess that's our go-to safety contract from here on out.
Hell yeah.
And then offensive tackle / tight end, the prodigal son returns, George Fant. Contract still not totally known yet. We know that it's up to 2 years, 14, but there are incentives in there. We're still waiting on the exact structure. But let's go one by one. Let's start with Rayshon Jenkins. Been a really good zone safety over these last couple of years for Jacksonville. SIS loves him. Next Gen Stats loves him. PFF does not, but I'm going to say this to anybody in the chat who might be wondering about that. PFF has admitted they don't really understand how to grade zone players on defense. They don't.
Nor safeties.
Yeah, safeties. Especially safeties.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't really understand who the zone player is supposed to defend, so they just guess. So when you look at that, understand that PFF has kind of admitted they're very shaky there. But he's been a good veteran player for that team for the last several years. Most Jacksonville fans that I've seen have been very unhappy with the fact that they cut him. And it does not cost us a compensatory pick because he was cut. So, Rayshon Jenkins, what do you see?
Well, I see a guy that when we get to this new model of safety, it's the way this game is moving before our eyes. I love this about the NFL, Brendan, versus other sports, where it has always got something that it's moving in a direction of. It's never in a place where it just, here's how this runs, here's how you build a team, here's what a safety has to do, here's what a linebacker has to do. It's always in a state of flux. And what I mean by that is that we are now moving into this era before our very eyes where your safety has to be able to do it all. And it's not a matter of you just fitting to a certain specific role, but you've got to be asked to play every position out there in that secondary that a safety could be required to play, from man to zone to single high down into the box. And when you watch the Jaguars on the tape that I checked out, I admittedly didn't go through a lot of his games yet, just a couple of his games. But what you do see them doing is rather than them running a lot of the split safety, they'll run split safety, but then it always goes to a single high post snap with them. So it's a lot of Rashawn ending up at times as the single high safety, or sometimes ending up as getting down there in that box. He's very fast from point A to point B. And that he is, when he wants to say, I want to get from here to there, he gets there in a blur at times, and that you can really feel that speed on the football field. He's solid all the way down the line, in my opinion, Brendan, where there's not a one point of his skill set that stands out that's some bigger, bright part of his game outside of maybe some of the athleticism and speed he brings for his size. But a good all-around player who shows comfortability in any of those roles you put him into, as far as the Jaguars were concerned. He wasn't lost in space when you put him out as a single high center field guy. And when you brought him down the box, he'll stick his nose in there and do what it takes. But I didn't also see anything that jumped out to me with him that was, I mean, maybe I might say that, I guess I put it like this. I felt like watching Julian Love's tape last year was a little more impressive to me than the tape that I saw from Jenkins so far, but I wasn't underwhelmed by the tape. It still isn't bad. It's solid. And the bang for buck factor and what you're paying for to get what you're getting from him at the position, which is a functional league average safety play, basically at this cost, not the worst of ways to go.
Yeah. I will admit that I was hoping the contract would be more like 2 years, $9 million.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw 2 years, 12, it was like, it's fine. It's nothing wrong with it. He's going to start for us, and that's pretty good money for a starting safety in the current league. Again, it's the exact same as the Julian Love contract. But when I'm looking around and I'm seeing a guy like Kevin Byard getting $7.5 million a year, and I'm seeing Jordan Whitehead get $4.5 million a year, I kind of feel like, this Rashawn Jenkins guy should probably be getting something like what Whitehead got. Like, to me, honestly, Whitehead's probably a little bit of a better player, and he's also much younger than Rashawn Jenkins, but not by enough for me to be like genuinely upset about this. So
yeah,
that's kind of where I stand on it at the moment.
Agreed. And one that you can be, if you get into the next year and you determine the value is not worthwhile there, easily can get out from under the deal after another year. As all of these 2-year contracts they've given out, they've set themselves in that position to be able to do so. But he's a fun player. He doesn't have any weaknesses. As I say, there's not some great strength, but I will say that in watching his tape, there wasn't something that stood out that he did that was bad. He's a good tackler. He operates in space, operates in zone well. He's got good length to him and size to him out there in the secondary that you feel. So, and a good blitzer too. When he comes off the edge, man, he's definitely got a gear to him there. But this is a solid signing, not spectacular, but it's good. Good, better, much better value and understanding the safety than where they've been, right, Brendan?
Yeah, exactly.
12 versus
very much so.
$55 million.
Yeah, and then we have George Fant coming in here to back up at right tackle. Also, probably offer a little bit of assurance at left. So, because he can play both. And I remember when he was here, he was better at left, but the last couple of years, I think he's been better at right. So he can do both. Also a little bit of tight end. But I love this signing. I love the idea of bringing him back. This was actually something on my primary wish list for this offseason. Fant was one of my guys. I think it makes all the sense in the world. Now, the fact that you brought him in and the fact that you gave him 2 years up to $14 million, and again, it will probably end up being something much less than that. It might end up being a 1-year deal with an easy out. But the fact that you did that doesn't say great things about how you're feeling about Abe Lucas's future, admittedly. And that sucks. Like, let me be clear about that. That sucks. That really sucks. But I'm glad that they actually did something about it instead of living in denial about it. So, I mean, if you got to do it, you got to do it. So I like this one a lot personally.
I do too. You had to bring the insurance policy in. It's a bit like Julian Love at the safety position last year with Jamal coming back off of his injury. You'd be silly not to find yourself an insurance policy for the situation. And as hard as it is to spend a little bit of that extra money to do that at that point, I think the other part to consider with this is that if I'm not mistaken, I think Stone Forsythe becomes a free agent after this year. So having that extra year in the contract as well as maybe gives you your number one swing tackle for the year going beyond this season. I also do believe, we'll see if I'm proven correct on this, Brendan. Maybe it ends up being another tight end they draft in this draft or do something with it. But I think the team's going to attempt to try to roll with 2 tight ends on the active roster, which I think is going to mean that when they go to 3 tight ends or goal line, it will be Fant coming out onto the field as that 6th offensive lineman or your 3rd tight end. And so that just adds even more value to the signing and what he brings, because now he removes the need to have an extra guy in your roster for that kind of position of player as far as that 3rd tight end, which is, I think, hugely valuable to the team.
Yeah, fade routes in the end zone to George Fant. It's coming.
I want to see it. I just want to see him give one more chance to work in space, Brendan. He got that one damn catch, man, and he tripped his legs up. He was out there in the open field, man. You know what he was thinking, right? He turns, he's like, you made the catch. You did it. Now you're going to go do some damage. Go do some damage. And he starts going, and man, those legs just, dun, 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 and he falls over, and it turns into an 8-9 yard gain. Still good. But, you know, he's thinking in the back of the head, man, I could have housed that thing.
Right. So I like both the signings. I don't like what it says about Abe Lucas's status, but if the status is bad, then you got to do something to deal with it. So I get it.
You do. It's sad with Abe because he was such a good player in that first year, and you really are thinking, man, we got a 1st round talent in the 3rd round for this guy. But they said chronic last year in referencing his knee. That doesn't mean that surgery will usually fix something when they say chronic. When they say chronic, it means it's going to be there forever.
Mm-hmm. Last thing that happened on day 3, Bobby Wagner departs yet again. We've been through this one before. Signs 1 year, and I'm just going to call it $8.5 million deal because he's going to hit his incentives. He always does. Sure. You know, the incentives are like tackle numbers. He's going to get tackles.
He'll get there. Yeah.
Yeah.
He'll play every game.
Yeah. Unless FedEx Field or whatever they're calling it now gets him, which
that's true. It
feels way too realistic. Unfortunately,
that's also, that would be sad if that field got him. That was the final thing that got Bobby was FedEx Field.
Yeah, like it did Chris Clemens, didn't it? Or he didn't? No, he didn't retire off of that, did he?
No, but it was definitely, I think, dinged him down because he wasn't back to 100% the next year, and then they cut him, and then he was the Jaguars, and I mean, so like he still was able to do some things, but it maybe made it easier for them to move on at that point, given that back situation.
So, it's not fun to see a legend go to another team like this, but I think it's very clear that McDonald didn't have a lot of interest in an aging linebacker like this in his defense, and I'm more than happy to go with that. If he doesn't want him, then he doesn't want him.
The only way to me, and I was a proponent of bringing back Bobby Wagner, but in taking time to think about this deal after I initially got a little bit pissy about it, I went and thought about it and went, well, really, the only reason it would make any sense to bring Bobby Wagner back for this year is if you thought for the 2024 season, you could be that contender that we talked about at the start of this show. Because is Bobby going to go and last to 2025? Are you going to rock with Bobby into 2025? Probably not likely. Your best case scenario is there's like one more season you squeeze out. Mm-hmm. And while I would love to have him finish his career here, and I kind of wish the NFL, Brendan, would do something like if a player's played in a spot for 10 years, like they would give you salary cap relief or something on if you gave him a contract, mm-hmm. where it's like an understanding of like, this is kind of like a legacy thing. I think that'd be cool to kind of do something like that, but that doesn't exist. And he's going to go get reunited with Ken Norton, his longtime linebackers coach. And of course, Quinn, who he's been underneath before. And I'm okay. I get it at that point. It makes sense from that lens.
Yeah, I've suspected, although I was open to bringing him back as well. I kind of was thinking I'll leave it up to Mike McDonald. What he wants, he gets. Mm-hmm. That Bobby would not be somebody that McDonald wanted to bring back, and I'm cool with it. Like, you look at McDonald's defense. I'm not surprised that he's looking at a 35-year-old linebacker and going, I'm not too interested in doing this unless I have to, and I don't have to, clearly.
No, I agree. I think he needs guys that absolutely can run. And I mean, how he had Roquan Smith at times as a single high safety. You're certainly not asking Bobby to do that at any time soon. So it's he wants to run the scheme fully, then he needs the players to do it in their skill set.
All right. So that was the end of day 3, and that got us to today.
And let me just, before we start today, let me get a cop on just a couple donos here real quick.
No problem.
Revenger32, thank you for another donation. He says, who won the agent of the year so far? Calvin Ridley's agent?
I mean, who else could it be other than Kirk Cousins' agent, right? Like,
Robert Hunt's agent's feeling pretty good about himself.
yeah,
I got a guard $20 million.
a right guard.
A right guard $20 million. I mean, that's pretty strong. A right guard, 20 million. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. And I think with the agent for Ridley, again, the desperation thing, Brendan, this is more proof to you make one bad decision in desperation with the Brown. Like, we don't want to pay Brown 25 million. Let's move him for a first round pick to the Eagles. Let's not pay AJ Brown that money. And you don't want to pay him on the 4-year, $100 million deal. And then you come back 2 years later for a guy like Calvin Ridley, who's not even coming off that good of a season with Jacksonville. A lot of drops last year after a year being away out of the NFL, who you're going to give a 4-year, $92 million deal to. And why? Because the blowback of losing Brown pushes you into this desperate state to go and jump on this guy like Ridley. This is why bad organizations stay in a bad state. Is it's bad money out with the bad money. It's, we made a bad decision. Let's double down on it with another bad decision, Brendan. Am I wrong on that? Or you see it the same way?
I don't think there's any other way to see it. It seems like it's confusing. It's confusing. Now, one thing I will say is the cap is way higher than it was 2 years ago. So there's a little bit of inflation you have to take into account with AJ Brown versus Calvin Ridley. But Calvin Ridley is just not that good of a receiver. So like Mike Evans got about the same, almost the same APY, right? Mike Evans is clearly a better receiver than Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, he's 4 or 5 years older. I'll still take Evans all day long over the top of Ridley.
Yeah, and I will admit I'm a little concerned about Evans at this point because of his age and all the beatings he's taken over the years. But still, it's like, is Calvin Ridley a number one receiver, a legitimate number one receiver in the NFL right now?
I don't feel like he is myself.
Right.
So, yeah, that agent's definitely doing some pumps on that as far as he took advantage of that situation. But this is the key of, if you make a bad choice or a bad decision, this is the good part of releasing Adams. And you don't just hold on to it or go and make another bad choice. You try to just pivot off it and start making some smart decisions with it. And the Titans are in a bit of a weird, that organization I think is going to be in a bit of a tough state for the foreseeable future with how they're running things right now. I'm not feeling them at all.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you, Revenger, for the double donation. John, thank you, John M429. Thank you for the $10 donation. He says, I love both of your channels, but I got to say, B&B is even better. Thanks for the dedication. Wouldn't take anyone over you two. Curious about Jenkins and Dodson. Well, thank you for the donation, John. I really do appreciate it, the support on that. And Jenkins should be a good player. He should be solid. He's a guy there's not going to be a hole that you might have gotten recently from either Julian Love, I think, or Jenkins as the safeties back here, where you're looking at one guy who can't cover and play cover two, or you're looking at another guy who can't come run the alleyway and come up and tackle in space. These guys are going to have this skill set where there's not some glaring hole to their game. And certainly I think McDonald's going to put them in a position for success. But they're solid all around in what they bring. And certainly they understand how to play in a scheme that's going to ask you to be in a variety of different areas on the football field, playing a variety of different roles.
Yeah. I think both guys, we still need to see contract details on Dodson, and we'll get to Dodson in 1 second. But I was very enthusiastic about that signing. I'll say that. That's my favorite thing we've done so far, probably.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, we're right on the edge of getting to Dodson on that one, John. So we'll definitely be touching on that in just a second. But thank you for the kind words. I think that these two safeties are going to allow us to be very, very much in the mode of disguising what we're doing pre-snap and then changing it up on the fly post-snap in a major way. And as I've said to Seahawks fans for years who've seen a defense that's the complete opposite of that, it's going to blow your mind when you start to see how much we're going to confuse the opponents on the offensive side of the ball week in and week out here with Mike McDonald's scheme. It's just an awesome part of what he's bringing to the table with this system.
Absolutely.
Thank you, John. I appreciate your $10 donation, brother. And I hope you're having a good night out there. We'll get to the Dotson here in just a sec, I promise you. John with another $5 donation. Thanks for the double dip, John. He says, I also hear we're bringing in Devin White and Simmons tomorrow. Well, that's interesting. I was hearing White had something.
Yeah, that was a troll account on X.
Was it the Bake Man? Was it the Baker Man?
No, it was somebody else. It was actually somebody else, but a lot of people bought into it. Yeah, apparently there was a report that we were going to have Simmons and White in at the same time, which That honestly sounds kind of weird right off the bat, right?
Yeah, it
Is
does.
it going to be like that scene in The Dark Knight where the Joker makes the two mobsters fight with the pool cue to decide who's going to join his gang? Like that's weird, right? Like, why would you do that?
Two men enter, one man leaves. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Thunderdome style, bro.
I
Um,
guess. But yeah, Devin White signed with Philly, and Isaiah Simmons. I'm not ruling it out, but at the same time, I he barely played last year, and I don't think it was injuries. I think they legitimately just shelved him. He's not good.
yeah, he just seems to be. It's especially the Giants last year, Brendan, who were in the state their defense was in with Martindale's, where he's like, just throw anything at the wall at that point and see what you can find that can stick. And you didn't really do it there with Simmons. White seems to be connected really heavily. I was hearing Eagles
Yeah, he
were,
signed. He
he
signed.
did sign. Okay, so
Yeah.
he is to the Eagles at this point, John. So sorry you got roped in. Both me and Brendan, it's hard for us to do our job throughout this week as we're going live because half the time we're having to play online detectives in the middle of a live stream show to figure out what's a troll account, what's somebody who's just having fun with people, and what's actually legitimate news coming down the line.
Yeah, there is a lot of that going on. There was a report that Clowney signed with Carolina. He didn't. That was like days ago, actually. There's a report. There's a lot of stuff. Like
It's a ton, man. It's like a whole cottage industry, Brendan. I don't know. Maybe we're missing our calling in this. Maybe we should just be doing troll videos all day long because these guys seem to have something they're getting out of it. I don't know what you get out of being like Devin White, Isaiah Simmons coming to Seattle tomorrow. Like, is it because you get like followers on X at that point? Because like,
yeah,
aren't they
you
bailing the
do.
second?
You get engagement on X.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the big NFL insiders has been DMing me on X the last couple of weeks every time he breaks something, and he's reliable. So I'm actually getting DMs whenever the Seahawks do anything now. So
Oh, nice, dude. That's
yeah,
hella awesome. Well, that's cool. There,
yeah,
that at least on the flip side of
it's
this,
it's
that's
made me
encouraging.
not hate this guy, and I used to hate this guy too. It's Howard Schultz's son.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's
Nice.
actually DMing me on Twitter now every time the Seahawks do something, and then he breaks the story and it gets DM'd to me, and it's like, thanks, dude. I don't.
Sweet, dude. Yeah, that's kind
Yeah,
of him.
I'm not going to make the sins of the father. I'm not going to make you pay for the sins of the father, I guess.
Well, I've raked his father over the coals at times in my streams. I have not been kind to Howard. I have not been kind to Howard, but hey, you know what I mean? I like Starbucks, so there's that at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
So that's cool. No, that's awesome to get some sources on this, Brendan. That's something I hope from both of our perspectives as we go along, and that'd be a cool thing if we can start to at some point pick up on this stuff would make that all the better if you get those kind of little inside things. So
Yeah.
sorry I got roped though, John. I appreciate the donation. Sorry you got splattered on that one, man. It's definitely frustrating with those. Cool Blaster. Thanks for the $2 donation. Says Cam Curl to the Rams. Will Jenkins make an impact? Rams doing smart moves here so far in free agency. You can't look at anything they've done and said, "Oh, that was horrible. That was bad." I certainly think they'll get a good amount out of. They'll find a way to utilize Parkinson, especially if Stafford's healthy there, and invest in your line. Can't get mad at that. And Cam Curl seems to be a guy that a lot of people really were eyeing. I had a lot of people that were pushing me, Brendan, to sign him in here in free agency.
Yeah, Spotrac had him getting paid like Xavier McKinney, and that clearly did not happen. I think Spotrac just has like a formula, and they just let the formula run on every free agent. And
Yeah.
sometimes the formula produces something that is obviously not true, but they roll with it anyway. Like they had Isaiah Simmons getting $16 million a year, which was very clearly not happening.
Hard to see them going through on each player. And, so this guy with that, with this, with that, it's much more likely, I think, to you that they got a little algorithm and they spit it into and it spits out some number and they're like, good enough. Sometimes it's accurate. Sometimes it's off.
Right. But Jenkins will make an impact, I'm sure. I don't know what kind of impact, but he's going to start. He's definitely starting, I think.
He'll be an improvement over what you had in Jamal Adams last year. The version of Jamal Adams that was on the football field, the little bit of the injured, not the same as once he was. This guy in Jenkins will be better than that. And in Julian Love, again, it's who's the free safety and who's the strong safety kind of becomes irrelevant in this defense, to be honest with you. So you're going to be improved, I think, at both positions ultimately. If you want to just call Julian at the free safety or Jenkins at the strong, You're improved at both of those positions, and you're spending now, at least cumulatively, just take the dead money out, 1/5 the cost for the production you're going to be getting, which is John Schneider learning his lesson, which is all I ever ask. Sometimes you're going to make mistakes and have problems as a general manager or a coach, Brendan, but learn your lessons from those mistakes.
Do you think we're going to do a lot of 3 safety stuff this year?
It's possible. I mean, it's definitely stuff that he would work in here and there at times into his system, especially as he was able to get Williams back to health, right? Because Marcus Williams, I think, was dealing with some stuff. That was their big signing there. So when they had him at health, there was some of that they were doing. But more of when they get to like a 3 safety look, Brendan, it's the rolling of the coverages, right? So it'd be that you'd have the 2 safeties, and then let's say you have your left outside corner playing even in press looks, and you have a 2 high shell. And then you go post snap, and then you end up rounding out to the outside corner, turning into a cover 3 look, basically, right? But with a 3 high shell kind of safety, instead of it being corners, it's just 2 your corners. You essentially end up with one of your safeties at the outside corner to this side, one of your corners outside this side, and you're free down the middle. So that's really more of the kind of look that he'll go to in a coverage, kind of almost a little bit of a quarters or something like that look to it. Not as much as the pure of you have 3 safeties on the field at one time, though, as much really, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, because I was looking through some of the options to see if there was another veteran safety we could get that either was cut or would cost less than the compensatory pick threshold. And I was wondering, like, do we need another one? And the answer is probably yes if we're going to do 3 safety stuff. Because right now we have nothing behind Love and Jenkins that is even remotely reliable.
No, you don't necessarily. I think that's where we also come back to the draft being a very potential likely place, be it early or late. You find a guy you pick, and then you fit him into maybe that role where, okay, you're coming out this year as a rookie, and you're going to come out in only these personnel packages that are the 3 safety sets, and it'll be for like 5 to 10 plays a game. Something like that could go on. I don't think that they spend more money back into the safety position, though, with what you're spending on Love, with what you're spending on Jenkins, with what you're still spending in dead money to Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams.
Would you be okay with bringing back Ryan Neal for like $2 million?
No, because you're in a different defense asking him to do different things.
Yeah, I'm just throwing that against the wall because a lot of people bring him up.
I definitely thought about it, and I get the love to him. I mean, he was maybe our best defensive player that final year before he left, at least according to PFF, he was.
Yeah, he was.
But I think that you weren't really going to move. For instance, you're not having Ryan Neal as a single high safety. You're not really going to try to put Ryan Neal into cover 2 shell situations and then into cover 2 defense. That's not really where he's kind of be at his best. He's more of a get him down the box or have him take the backs in the flat or the tight ends in a curl route underneath. I think that's better a place for Ryan Neal. So it's just, you're not running the kind of the same defense now to utilize his strengths.
Mm-hmm. You're probably right. But I don't know. I still look at the safety room and I'm a little bit nervous about it because there's nothing behind the 2 vets. And I'm wondering if like Eddie Jackson, Micah Hyde, Marcus May, is there something here that we could get cheap that would work? And I don't know. It's tough. Like we could get Ugo Amadi back. He's playing safety now for the Saints. You get Kevon Wallace, who we actually visited with today. I'm not completely convinced we're done at safety. I'll put it that way.
It's possible. I probably think they would wait till after May 1st at that point to address that, which means post the draft. If they can't get through the draft, then they would make a move on that. But I do think that if we're talking about pry 1 on this, I think it's going to be to find in the draft, and it could be in a various place that they find it, right? Doesn't have to mean that they go target it high. It could be somebody into the 4th, 5th, 6th roundish area too. So, but I think that they will walk away of the draft with at very least 1 safety.
You would certainly think so. Yeah, I agree with that. Okay. So yeah. Jenkins will make an impact anyway to loop back around.
Thank you, Cool Blaster. Appreciate you for that.
Right. All right. So that gets us to today, right? We're now caught up with today. And not a lot happened with the Seahawks today, to be perfectly honest. It was mostly just we got filled in on details of these contracts. We also got filled in with the Lockett restructure details. We cut the cap hit this year down to 18.5. It was previously like 27 something. So that's where a lot of the space comes from. And his cap hit next year is 30 million and his dead cap hit is 4 million. So it's he's getting cut next year.
Right. Yeah, unless there's some substantial of restructuring for a year like they did here, which we'll see what Locke does, but I think that's where it's pushing towards.
And I think he probably retires at that point too and goes into real estate, which I mean, it seems like he's doing pretty well over there, honestly.
He's had a hell of a career if it works out that way. And what a beautiful story, Brendan, to be able to look at a player that's played in Seattle and played their whole career here, especially considering all the Legion of Boom guys that moved here, moved there, back and forth. And even a guy like Bobby. It's been hard to find these guys that remain the whole way here unless they have some premature injury that ends their career. So we've actually get one guy that's going to be here for the whole of his career and locking at that, which is pretty awesome to see.
Yeah. And then we got to the Sam Howell trade, which we already talked about. I don't think we need to revisit that, but that was the big hammer of the day and arguably of the week because it's so interesting. It's not the biggest move or the weightiest move, but it's the one that is generating, I think, the most discussion.
There's ripples off this particular pond and dropping this rock in with the Howell. And that's what, to your point, is really interesting about this is it tells you a lot about what John thinks of this draft for quarterbacks, about potentially the direction the Hawks take in this draft, about the potential of trading out there for a guy like Justin Fields. So it does a lot to kind of close certain doors and provide some clarity in other ways.
Right. And then we made the move right before I turned the stream off earlier today. Tyrell Dodson. We don't know the contract yet, but we do know the player. Filled in really well for Matt Milano on a Bills defense that was gutted last year. They lost not only Matt Milano, they lost Tre'Davious White, and I think they lost their stud safety as well.
Daquan Jones.
Yes, Daquan. Right, there we go. Yeah, and Daquan Jones was playing extraordinary football before he got hurt, by the way. So I know people are going to say, oh, who's that? It was a guy who was playing like Jalen Carter before he got hurt last year.
Yeah, he was having a strong season, contract year.
Yeah, so this guy excelled without being surrounded by studs. You can't say like, oh, he was a product of his teammates because his best teammates all got hurt too. And PFF graded him in the 90s, strong in coverage, strong against the run, did a little bit of everything. The Bills defense was elite. I think by the end of the year, they were like 4th in the league in points allowed. So he was a big reason why they were able to maintain that. And without knowing the contract details exactly, I think this is probably going to be my favorite thing we do this offseason. He's young. He's got pretty good size to him. He's not terribly undersized or anything like that. He's got very little miles on him because he basically didn't play until this season. And I love it.
I share your enthusiasm with the signing. He was not only just highly rated by PFF, Brendan, he was the most highly rated player of inside linebackers in the entire sport last year by them. So that is substantial, though it is on 500 snaps versus probably about the 800 or 900 snaps a typical other middle linebacker would have gotten, like a Fred Warner or a Bobby Wagner type. So it isn't sample size, but it's certainly to take into mind with that PFF grade. Love the signing. I don't expect it to be a very big one, Brendan, because it is just 1 year of half a year of production, essentially. But still a guy that, like you say, fits really well into this defense. The Bills run a lot of varied stuff on their defense with, they'll do the split safety look stuff. They'll roll their linebackers in various places. So you've got to do a variety of different things for them, and watch just a tiny bit of tape today to get a little bit familiar with him. And another guy, a little bit like Rashawn Jenkins to a tiny degree. I think he's got even a bit more upside than Jenkins, of course. He's really good about getting off blocks by using his speed and athleticism to just get up ahead of the blocks and around them. He can just kind of bounce around you with some of his athleticism that he possesses. Good speed, solid instincts to get to the play, plays really well in zone coverage in some of his drops. He's very smart in getting to the right space and picking up the coverage in the right area. Just a natural good feel to the flow of what they're doing from the routes and the patterns and whatnot. So I didn't do a deep dive on him necessarily on that film stuff, Brendan, but from what I saw initially, so I'm pretty solid tackler. There are times he can get a little out of control coming up in space. But he can do a little bit of everything across the board, including he is a good blitzer too, in addition to that. So I like what he brings, man. Not a real any major, huge weakness to him, but this is a good play. Probably not going to cost a lot. And he's going to be a will linebacker for you. So not the Mike, but the will, and he'll fit there well.
Right. And I think we're getting close to the point where we've created flexibility to be relatively BPA for the draft. I don't think we're there yet, but we're close. They need to do a little something at guard, like even if it's just bringing back Phil Haynes, which I hope we can do a little better than that. But even if it's just something like that, so we have a left guard on the roster, so we're not like sweating bullets that we can get a elite left guard in the draft. But if you do something like that, you're pretty dang close to feeling liberated in the draft, I think.
I believe you're right. Certainly, I think that when you look at the positions where we stand right now, to me, it stands out, as you mentioned, you're down 2 left guards. You're down at least 1 middle linebacker as far as let's just call it the bare necessities here a bit, Brendan. But that's not the worst place to be at, all things being considered, coming into a draft. If that's really what we're sitting on, is really the true bare necessities. It's that, and you've got to go get yourself maybe a 4th running back. You got to find yourself maybe another safety. But these are not, none of these things are burning up the front burner, and you've got to go and package picks and go get this player there. So he has set the stage. I do agree with you that he is probably likely to at least get a guard in here somewhere that's a left guard to at least provide a little bit of safety net for you coming into the draft versus being pulled very desperately at that point going to the draft for it. But as we heard from John Schneider today, Brennan, he just kind of, he doesn't dig guards, man. That's not his thing.
Yeah, that's one thing he talked about. I agreed with him in terms of free agency. I think it would be a mistake to go spend an ungodly amount on guards. By the way, with the right guards getting paid like this now, like Robert Hunt, what's going to happen when the next elite left guard hits the market? Is he going to get like 28 million a year?
Well, that's the way it works, right?
Yeah.
At least 25 if he's an elite left guard. I mean, right guards are supposed to be more devalued, and they're getting 20. I mean, that's the way that flow works.
I didn't totally like it when he also applied that philosophy to the draft, where he said guards are getting overdrafted. And it's like, well, when you need a guard as badly as we do, it's not overdrafting, especially with how important left guards are now. So I'm hoping that when the draft comes around, if he has the opportunity to get Fatanu in the first round, or Bebe in the second round, or Graham Barton in the late first, early second, he goes for it.
John got burned by Robert Gallery 13 years ago, and he just can't let it go. It's just a pebble stuck in his shoe for all of time. And it does frustrate me, like it frustrates you, especially when you look at our track record, Brendan, being that, if I'm not mistaken, we have never taken a first or second round guard in John Schneider's entire time here. Am I wrong on that?
Let me think here. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think that if you were to make a list of the best guards that the Seahawks have had during the Pete Carroll, John Schneider era, like J.R. Sweezy would be really close to the top, and that was a defensive lineman you converted.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying with it. I mean, Lewis was a 3rd round guy, but that was considered high when you took him there, considering where you had been with the guards and the centers up until that point. So this seems to be the spot where he just has that kind of opinion on it. I agree with you, though, that you need to get guys that fit this scheme. And a big problem of what you've done prior to this is not getting interior offensive linemen that fit this scheme. I thought we were kind of starting to go this way with the Lucas and Cross thing a couple of years ago. And the good news on this, Brendan, is that you got 2 of the 5 guys set. Lucas and Cross both have familiarity with a spread-based concept. Their skill set fits to a spread-based concept. But now you've got to get the interior of the offensive line to do that as well. Bradford's got some of that skill in his game because he's so damn athletic for being so big. And certainly Olu can do it. But you do need more.
Mm-hmm. And I think we just actually had a signing from the Seahawks.
Breaking news. Breaking news from BNB.
Okay, Aaron Wilson, and I don't know very much about this player, so you might have to help me out here. Jeremy Reeves. Jeremy Reeves, 2 years, $6 million. I think he's a safety. So let me make sure I get that right. Yes, he's a safety for Washington.
All right. So yeah, I don't know much about
Jeremy Reeves. He made first team All-Pro 2 years ago as a special teamer.
So we got a special team signing then.
Yeah.
So it's a 2-year low-end deal for a special teams specialist.
All right. They're burning the midnight oil here. Let me take a look. How much does he play on defense? So it looks like he started 3 games in 2022, which was the year he made All-Pro. Played not a ton on defense, but he does play a few hundred snaps on defense a year. But yeah, this looks like a wizard special teamer, basically.
Yeah. So you're bringing him in. I mean, you were worried about maybe this is that they don't want to draft a guy necessarily or be drawn to have to draft a guy like we were just talking about a second ago, that this gets you some of that insurance to where, okay, Jarek Reed, Julian Love, Rashawn Jenkins, this cat, maybe Kobe Bryant, depending on where you stand with him. But
I'm not expecting anything from Jarek Reed this year anyway. He tore his ACL. I'd be surprised if he plays very much football this year.
Very much is a keen possibility here. So it makes sense. Again, just you're setting that stage to be able to operate from the value-based mindset of things, Brendan, and you really want to drive there as hard as you can, because the more you drive hard prior to the draft, I think the better the success story is in the draft and staying in that value-based model versus having to deviate it on picks in the third round, in the fifth round, the first round, and I think this helps you avoid that.
Okay. All right. So I guess that is pretty much everything there is to say. That catches us up to where we are. And we now, I think, still have a little more cap space to work with, but it's probably pretty close to the end.
Yeah, I think that they probably made the noise that they're looking to make at this point. Certainly, like you said, left guard's a possibility here, middle linebacker's a possibility, and even maybe a little bit of an outside with edge if we're talking about maybe waiting a little bit down the line. But I think we've probably done what we're looking to do here at this point. And I think the thing that stands out on these signings is though they're low end, though they're 1 and 2 year deal, Brendan, you've been able to do is go get a guy at a position that you had last year, at the very least, get the same production / there should be some uptick of production without having to pay some of the same high cost in some of these positions, which is what smartly run football clubs do.
Okay. And chat is now telling me that unfortunately it looks like Aaron Wilson typoed and meant to type Commanders, not Seahawks. You can't do that. You got to be professional. So never mind. Ixnay on the Jeremy Reeves stuff. Looks like he meant to type Commanders, actually typed Seahawks.
Damn it, Aaron. Damn it, Aaron. Get it right.
Yeah, you got to get this stuff right. But yeah, okay. So never mind the Jeremy.
You have one job. You have one job.
Yeah. Yeah, and chat is also telling me that Aaron Wilson messed up. So don't blame us. Blame him.
Aaron Wilson, you fired.
Mm-hmm. So Jeremy Reeves was a Seahawk for about 45 seconds, I guess. Which
you're dead to me, Reeves.
Yeah, that beats Kerry Williams' record for shortest 10 years as Seahawk.
That's a new record. Get that in the Guinness, man.
Mm-hmm. Oh well, but I like where things are going here. I like where this offseason is headed overall. I'm here for it. We're probably not going to win the Super Bowl this year, but I don't think there's much you could have done that would have created a situation where you could win the Super Bowl this year anyway. So don't overextend yourself in the meantime.
Don't overextend yourself. And that's the thing that Brendan said is a key point. I think that it's a good place for us to finish up on, is that consider on this, the outlook of it from a perspective standpoint of trying to think of the fact that this team had a real feasible possibility to becoming elite next year versus the much more feasible possibility that 2025 can be that time. And if you come to the answer of saying 2025 can be that time, then what you really want to do at that point is set the stage best for 2025, not for 2024. As hard as that is to do, and as tough as that is as kind of a gut punch to go, yeah, but we still have a really talented team. And we're not saying tank next year, like Brendan said at the top of this show. It's not tank. It's just about going all in, about pushing in a highly aggressive manner. And I think the Hawks are doing a smart job of understanding now's not right the time, but we've got it ready. We've got it chambered up for next year to be able to go and do just that at that time and be ready to roll. And I would expect them to be much more aggressive moving into offseason at that point, Brendan. And much more of an opportunity for us to truly then become a contender, because that's what this is about. It is about being a consistent winner. It's about getting yourself to a contending state. And to do that, that takes planning. That sets the track, the groundwork and the foundation, and being smart in a multitude of processes to get there.
Yeah. It's the right way to go about things. Sometimes you have to walk before you can run.
Beautifully put, brother. What have you put? Well, folks, do me a favor here today on this video, whether you're watching on Brendan's side or on my side, hit that like button if you could. Please do get subbed up on both sides, on both channels. That helps us out tremendously. Brendan just passing 17,000, you said?
Yes, 17,000.
So just cooking around 17,000 subscribers. He's rolling around. And we will be back again here this next Thursday. Very soon we'll be starting to twist forward on some of our draft coverage. We'll still be touching on some of the free agent stuff if there's some moves that come down. But we will be back next Thursday for that. I really appreciate all of you guys watching out there on that side of it. We had, man, a lot of people in chat tonight, Brendan, well over 800. So people are definitely percolating around the free agent period, and that was great to see.
For sure.
Thank you to everybody on the donation front of it as well. We will be back really soon. Your Seahawks are making moves. The future is looking very bright, just requiring just a little bit of patience. As Brendan said, gotta crawl before you can walk, before you can run. And that's what the Seahawks are doing right now. Thank you, Brendan, for doing this, man, and hanging in there for almost, 32.5 hours here today. Appreciate you for that. And we will be back in a week. Until that time, my fellow Seahawks faithful, please, by God, don't you ever forget. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.